Well, hello everybody and welcome to this live stream. I've decanted from my garage. I am now up in my studio and I thought it'd be useful to do a stream all about risk assessments. Don't worry guys, it's not going to be a 4-hour stream this one, because let's be honest, who's going to want to watch and rewatch a 4-hour live stream all about risk assessments? But it is a really important topic. A few people have been messaging me about risk assessments over the past few weeks in relation to firework displays. So I thought it would be perhaps useful for you guys to show you like how I risk assess when I'm doing public firework displays. I should just caveat this that there are a number of different ways to risk assess. Everybody does it slightly differently. There's no kind of one specific way that it must be done. I'm going to show you how I do it. I do it in a quite simplified way. You can do it in more complex ways as well, but I'm going to try and show you guys something a little bit more simpler to do on mine. So welcome in everybody. If this is your first time watching me, my name's Mark. I do pyrotechnics, fireworks professionally, and also I'm a bit of an enthusiast as well. So I've always been interested in fireworks for many years. So it's a bit of a hobby and a passion of mine. And I say I do it professionally as well. And risk assessments, I've been doing risk assessments for years, and I actually really enjoy doing risk assessments. I know some people don't. I know some people think they're boring. Some people think it's just a box ticking exercise, but I have a completely different view on risk assessments, because I discovered sort of years ago that actually if you want to do something, as long as you can risk assess it and mitigate the risks, you can do it. So, you know, I was in jobs where it's like, oh, you can't do that, you can't do this. And it's like, well, here's a risk assessment which says that I can do it because I'm going to factor in all these different mitigations. And they're like, oh, actually, yeah. So rather than viewing risk assessments as being like just a box ticking exercise and a bit of paperwork that has to be done, it's boring, you can actually see it in a more positive way of actually, you know, this is a way that you can do things that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do. And so when it comes to fireworks, it allows you to do firework displays, public firework displays, safely. So let's say hello to a few people in the chat. Shimmer and Shine official channel is here. You can never expect the unexpected. That's true. And risk assessing is not going to make sure that you never have any incidents, but it's going to show, it's going to demonstrate that you kind of considered what the risks are, what the hazards are, and you've taken steps to mitigate those and reduce those risks as much as you can. There are going to be still some inherent risks. Whenever you do fireworks, there are always going to be risks, okay? But it's how you manage those, it's how you mitigate those, it's how you're trying to reduce those to an acceptable level. So 3D printer guy says hello, hope you are all okay. I'm okay. Yes, I say I've decanted from my garage up to the warmth, up to my studio up here, so it's a little bit warmer up here than it has been in my garage for the past couple of weeks. So Luke is here as well, just got here in time. Hello Luke, welcome in, welcome back. So yeah, I've just preambled for 3 minutes all about how great risk assessments are and how much I love doing them. I know not everybody does, but as I say, it's about how you view them, and I view them as actually tools to allow you to do things that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do and do them safely. So, and Bulletproof Mom says, yeah, well said. Working volunteering with, I've done many risk assessments. Yeah, and as I say, some people absolutely hate risk assessments and just see them as a box ticking exercise to please somebody else. View them differently. View them as actually, it's a tool to allow you to do things that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do. So if you really want to do something and your managers are saying, no, I'm not just talking fireworks now, I'm just talking in life in general, in work. If you want to do something in your workplace and the managers say, no, you can't do that, without giving it any much thought, if you go away and actually do a proper risk assessment for it and actually say, well, look, here are the risks and this is what I'm going to do to minimize those risks and mitigate it, then, you know, more often than not, they'll say, oh, actually, yeah, you've actually given this a lot of thought and what you're proposing actually makes sense. And yes, those risks are now acceptable with those mitigations. And so you can go and do it. So Samantha Lowe is here. Hello, Sam. Welcome in. Shimmer and Shine, the weather's been very wild today. Yes, there's been a bit of a storm, hasn't there, in parts of the UK. We've kind of missed most of it here up in Manchester. We've had a bit of rain, a bit of wind today, but it's not been too bad. 3D printer guy says, I visit older people, IT support in my job, and I carry out a lot of risk assessments too. Yeah, so we're going to talk about different types of risk assessments, but I want to focus primarily today on, risk assessing public firework displays. Now, if you are doing a firework display in your back garden for your friends and family, do you need a risk assessment? No. If you're doing any form of firework display where there's going to be public in attendance, you need to do a risk assessment. It's as simple as that. Why do you need to do a risk assessment? Well, like I said earlier, it basically is a tool that you can use to demonstrate that you've considered the risks of what you're about to do and that you've taken action to try and minimize those risks to an acceptable level. So I'm going to show you kind of what I do. I start off with, Clive is here as well. Hello, Clive. And guys, you feel free to stop me as we go and ask questions. And it's going to be a bit of a forum, a bit of an open discussion. Let's say everybody does risk assessments slightly differently. This is for people that are putting on little public displays. Big firework companies that are doing big professional displays, they will have a different risk assessment structure that will probably be a lot more in depth. I'm going to show you a simplified one that kind of covers you just as well. So, but I will just say, I'm not a legal person. I'm not saying that, hey, if you follow my template and do risk assessments that way, then if something goes wrong, you're going to be covered. I'm not saying that. It's just about showing you the methodology that I use in my own risk assessments, and hopefully you guys can pick something up from that and something useful. So I say it's not going to be a 4-hour stream. So let's get straight into it. So I start my risk assessments. I do my risk assessments primarily in Word, Microsoft Word. Again, other spreadsheet and word processing programs are available. Let me show you how I start mine. So let's cut to this. So on the first page of my risk assessment, in the corner, I always put when it was last updated, because risk assessments are quite a dynamic thing. I will write a risk assessment a number of weeks before a display, send it off to the client, but there's every chance that will be tweaked and reviewed and modified before the actual display itself, as if weather conditions, forecasts change and things like that. So it's always good to state when your risk assessment was created and last updated, is what I will say first and foremost on that. Let's just move the chat over there. Can I pop out chat? That would be really good if I can. Oh, I can pop out chat. Even better. Let's pop out chat and put that over here. Okay, so I can still read it. 3D printer guy, I'm bagging up some cakes while watching, ready for Saturday. It's going to rain, so I've switched to Talon, so I do a lot of it now. Yes. Yeah, and again, that's why risk assessments as well will include the forecast, but forecasts can change. So that's why it's good to have the date on your risk assessment of the date you created it or the date it was last updated. So my risk assessment starts off on the front page with like an overview of the event. I've obviously removed information from here. This is just to give you guys a bit of an example, a bit of a template. So the name of the event, I've just put fireworks display. If you're doing this part of another event, then you put the name there. The event organizer, so who is actually organising the event? So not the fireworks, the actual overall umbrella event that the fireworks are going to be part of. If you are organising the event, then obviously you put your name there. The venue contact, so the venue, wherever you're doing these fireworks, it's always good to include a venue contact. So a named person and a contact number for that person. Or if there's two contact people, put their names, put their numbers on here, then you've got that to hand. Because it's always good to have a copy of this risk assessment with you on the day as well. So having all this information you can easily see on the front page is really useful. The event date, so the date you're going to do your firework display. The event location, be specific, give the full address of the venue you're doing it, give the postcode. If you want to be really kind of clever, you can give like GPS coordinates or a what 3 words reference or whatever, but it's fine to just put the venue address and the postcode. And then we go on to approximate timing. So what time are you going to be setting up the fireworks? So in this example here, we got from midday. The approximate time you're going to be firing them. Again, if you've done firework displays, you'll know it doesn't always necessarily mean if you put 5:30 here, it's going to go at 5:30. There's all kinds of factors that could mean it goes a little bit earlier, a little bit later. So these are just approximate timings. And then what time you expect to kind of vacate the site and have cleared up the site. I like to kind of give an indication of what I'm anticipating the audience demographic to be. So first of all, how many people are actually going to be at your display watching it? Are there going to be a dozen people? Are there going to be 100? Are there going to be 1,000, 5,000? Put that down in your risk assessment, because obviously that's a factor. The more people you have, the more things you've got to consider. So I always like to put like an audience profile, expected audience size. I break it down further into what percentage. So I've put here like 300 people at this example display. 30% of them are going to be adults, 30% children, 40% students. So this will be a display that's in a very kind of studenty area. So why is it worth breaking it down into the demographics? Well, again, if you're doing a display for just adults and there's not going to be any children there, then there's different safety aspects you need to consider than if there were lots of children there. If there were lots of toddlers there, obviously there's more safety considerations you need to consider. So I like to break it down like that. But if you don't want to go into that much detail, as long as you put an approximate audience size, spectator size, and that's good. So also put the duration of your firework display in. So here, approximately 13 minutes. If you've scripted a pyro musical, you will know exactly how long your display is going to last. If you're hand firing, or if you are just doing a show where you're kind of manually firing on an electronic system, you know, you might not know the exact duration, so just give an estimate there. And then really importantly, the weather forecast during the event. So in this example, mostly cloudy, 60% cloud cover, chance of rain, wind, temperature, dew point, sunset. So what kind of important things do you need to include with weather? The main one is wind. Okay, wind is the biggest obstacle to doing fireworks safely. Rain, if it's raining, you can still do fireworks. Obviously, if it's torrential rain, there might be other, you know, the audience is not going to want to stand and watch it there, but you could still do fireworks in torrential rain. It just won't be that enjoyable. But from a safety point of view, the key one is wind. So that's why I kind of indicate cloud cover. If you want to get really kind of in depth, you could indicate the cloud ceiling. If you've got shells that are going really, really high, you're unlikely to have shells. If you're just doing a non-professional Cat 2, Cat 3 display, you're probably not going to have shells in it. The chance of rain, again, you know, that can always be hit and miss on the day, but it's good to just get an idea of roughly what the forecast is. Jersey Mike is here. Hi, Marko. He says, welcome in, Jersey Mike. So wind speed and wind direction are the two critical ones. You want your wind speed to be low. I can't really give you an exact figure of what, you know, don't fire if it goes above X amount of miles an hour, because it will depend on your location. It will depend on the size of your firing area, your safety area, where your audience are, where your fallout area is. So it's not a one size fits all of saying, oh, well, if it's less than X, then fire. If it's more than this, then don't. And it's important to know what the gusting wind forecast is as well, because, you know, you could have quite a gentle, a slight wind, but you could have gusts that are quite strong. So you need to kind of take that into account. And then also the wind direction. So the compass direction it's coming from and going to. Ideally, of course, you want that away from your spectators so that it blows all the smoke and debris away from the fireworks and away from the spectators rather than towards the spectators. So that's kind of what I do on my first bit of my risk assessment. So key facts about it. I then go on to talk about event particulars. So I will state that all the fireworks that I fire are compliant, CE compliant to BSEN 15947. Really, if you're doing a firework display in the UK using consumer products, they need to all be compliant with that. So don't use any kind of knockoffs that you pick up off the back of a van that somebody's offered you. Make sure you're using fireworks that are certified and that are sourced from reputable UK suppliers. I also like to, at the very end of my risk assessment, put a list of manufacturers, importers of fireworks used in the display with their addresses and contact details as well. I just find that a useful thing to have in, so that if on the day, if there is a query over one of the fireworks in your display by law enforcement or whatever, and they want to query, there's your reference, there's all the addresses of all the importers and retailers and things like that. So we'll come on to that in a bit. Bulletproof Mum says, luckily the display we meant to go to tonight got moved rather than cancelled. Going next week now, we're only on the edge of the storm here, but it got quite bad earlier. Yeah, same here. We've not really felt much of the storm up here in Manchester. We got quite a heavy shower this afternoon, a bit of wind, but nothing major. I think the Channel Islands have had it worse. Also, let's state what category of fireworks you're going to be using. If you're only doing a category F2 display, state that you're only doing category F2. If you're doing category F3 and F2, state that. State what the typical safety distances are for those different categories. And I also do an appendix later on where I actually list the types of fireworks that are going to be in my display. So if there's no rockets in your display, don't list it. If there's going to be cakes, list it. And then, there's a quick kind of, you'll see that later on in the appendix. We just got a quick overview of the types of fireworks that are going to be included in your display. So fireworks will be set out in daylight. It's always useful to set out fireworks in daylight rather than in the dark. And then from the time, prior to this, the venue shall erect a suitable crowd barrier. The position is indicated by the orange lines on the attached site plan. So we'll come on to a site plan in a minute. But your risk assessment as well, it needs to make it clear whose responsibility different aspects of the risk assessment are. So for example, in this risk assessment, we've put that the venue is responsible for setting up the crowd barrier. Often it might be you that is responsible for that, in which case you would say that in here and state your method for doing that safely. So Shimmer and Shine schools and airports were closed today. 100 houses without power. Yeah, South Coast, Channel Islands, Isle of Wight, etc. were badly affected. Yes, that's right. Quick overview of how you're going to secure your fireworks. So larger fireworks will be staked to the ground to prevent movement and toppling. Smaller fireworks will be suitably mounted to prevent movement and toppling. State as well who's going to be firing the fireworks. If there's a number of people that are going to be firing them, if you're hand firing them, there's a couple of you, state their names on the risk assessment. Make sure they're logged on the risk assessment as to who's going to be doing it. If those people are trained, got qualifications, a BPA, Illuminate Consult, anything like that, put that down there as well. So here we are, named is trained, experienced and competent pyrotechnician. State how your fireworks are going to be fired. Are you going to be hand firing them? Are you going to be firing them electronically? If you're electronically firing them, it's worth just mentioning the name of the firing system that you're using, and state that it's a reputable, reliable system. It's used, conforms to relevant CE standards, rather than just like a little nail board you've made yourself. So if you're going to electronically fire, use a reputable system. At the end of the event, all firework materials, including any partly spent or misfired fireworks, will be removed from the site or safely destroyed on the site if necessary. Sometimes it's actually safer to destroy the fireworks that have misfired on the site than it is to take them away and dispose of them. So, and this next one's really important because quite often when you're doing a firework display at a venue, that venue will have their own risk assessment, which may or may not cover firework displays. Sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it does. But if they've got a risk assessment for fireworks as part of their kind of venue risk assessment, and you come along with a different risk assessment, whose risk assessment's going to take priority, yours or theirs? So you need to kind of make that clear so there's no discrepancy or no ambiguity in that. So in this, I've put this risk assessment should be read in conjunction with the venue's own event risk assessment. Where discrepancies arise between the two, specifically in relation to the firework display, this risk assessment will take precedence. You might decide that the venue's risk assessment takes precedence, but you need to make it clear so that there's not that ambiguity there in the risk assessments. I then have a little section about stewarding arrangements. So who's responsible for stewarding at the event? Is it my responsibility or is it the venue's? Make it clear whose responsibility it is. Again, the same with first aid. Whose responsibility is it for first aid at the event? Is it yours or is it the venue's? Make it clear. Basically, your risk assessment, you can't have ambiguity in there. You need to make it clearly defined who is responsible for these different aspects of your event. So then we come on to site plan. So I include a graphical site plan, which you kind of grab from Google Maps. Shimmer and Shine says organised firework displays are better than you setting off your own fireworks. Yeah, and that's what this is about, really. This is if you are organising a firework display, how do you organise it safely? So that's what we're covering today. So always try and do a site visit fairly close to when you're doing your display. So if you do a display at the same site, let's say every year on bonfire night, and the last time you were there was a year ago, go back again before you do your display. Go back a few weeks before, check nothing's changed on the site. You might find trees have grown, and there might be skips on site. I did a display once where a container just appeared that wasn't there the year before, and it had all kinds of fuel and things in. It's like, oh, hang on. So always try and do a site visit, even if if you've not been there for a year. Go back a few weeks before, a month before, or whatever. See it with your own eyes. I can't stress how important that is to do. And and then do a site plan. And I've talked about different things on the site plan here, indicating different things, and we'll come on to that in a second. So how do you get a site plan? What do you do on your site plan? Well, I go to Google Maps and basically take a screenshot of that. So let's jump over to Google Maps a second. So where's that over here? Here it is. Now I'm going to pick a field, just a random field in Bradford. It's not one I've done fireworks at. It's a public field, so you legally can't do fireworks there without a permit. But I just picked this just as a random field. It came to my attention a while back because there is a firework retailer that actually sets off fireworks in this park, which is totally illegal. I'm not going to name them, but they probably know who they are. So John is here. Hi, John. So let's zoom in. So it's a park here in... I've got to find where it is now. Let's go into this. Right, here we go. So there's a bit of a grass area here. So this infirmary field, like this triangular shaped bit of land, we're going to pretend we're going to do a hypothetical firework display in this field. So we'll risk assess this field. But first of all, we need to create a site plan. So what we do is we need to take a screenshot of that, and then we need to put that into our, let me just see where my image is there. So I've taken a screenshot of that. I'm going to then put that into, let me switch back to my risk assessment. Here we go. So I'm going to put an image of a site plan here. Let's put it on a new page. So paste that in there. So there we go. I've got a copy of my site plan in there. So I then need to label that site plan. Now I tend to do this in a separate graphical editor. There are some imaging editing tools you can use within Word itself. So we will have a look at those. Let me just get the chat back. Pop out chat because I lost it. There we go. Okay, so what do you need to mark on your site plan? Obviously, you need to mark where your fireworks are going to be. You need to mark where your spectators are going to be, where your safety area is, where your fallout area, where access and egress points are, where vehicle access is. There's quite a lot to add in on that. Let's just switch back actually a second to the browser. One really useful thing about Google Maps, and this is really useful, is they have a tool on there that allows you to measure distance, which is so useful. So let's just say we're going to do the fireworks down this tip end of the field. So I can right click there and go to measure distance, and it puts a point on that map, and I can then click somewhere else. So let's go there, and it will show me the distance between those 2 points. So that's 25.17 meters. Now obviously if I was doing category F3 fireworks in this display, I would need a minimum of 25 meters to spectators, but also because this is a pavement along here, there could be people walking along here, so I need to ensure that there is 25 meters from this pavement at least. We're talking minimums here. So this is a really, really useful tool in Google Maps to allow you to measure distances and sort of accurately get a site plan together. So yeah, we've got 25 meters there. Obviously we can then drag this around. So let's see if we've got 25 meters. Let's drag this up here. So we've got 30 meters there, so we're okay there. 30 meters. Now here, oh, you see there, we've got just under 25 meters. That's 24 meters there. So we can then just move this first point up a bit. So we're trying to work out where we can do our fireworks safely, where they're more than 25 meters away from a road. So there we go, 25, just about get 25, might move it a little bit further in. These are minimums again. So yeah, we are more than 25 meters away from any point in that footpath now, which is really good. So we then need to obviously be a minimum of 25 meters away from our spectators. So let's assume that our spectators are going to be down this end of the field. So we can drag this along and see. So that would be 30 meters. We can go a nice big distance here. We could easily get like 60 meters to there. or more. It's 80 meters to there. So again, it depends on your audience size as well. Let's say we've got a couple of hundred people, we can probably go like 70 odd meters there. That would still give enough space at the back here to be able to put your audience. Shimmer and Shine says, how's Mrs. Great Marko and Naomi? They are doing very well, thank you. Okay, so we know our kind of rough distances there now, so that's going to be in line with that. So let's cut back then to Word. So in Word, you can go to Draw, and you can kind of draw on here. So let's put our fireworks area, let's say in red, and we can kind of draw this on. Again, you could do this better in a graphics editor. I am just doing this kind of like that. I'm going to clear that because that's going to be far too close to audience. So let's go delete. Oh, no, I don't want to delete it from there. Highlight it. There we go. Let's undo. There we go. Okay, so let's do that again. Let's do that in red. Let's get a little bit of a smaller thing, and let's say that our fireworks are going to be in that area there. Again, we do a key underneath to say that the red highlighted area is going to be where the fireworks are. And then we could say, right, yellow. So spectators are going to be, let's get a bigger pen for this. So spectators are going to be in this area and back here up to there. So again, it's easy to do this in graphics editor. I'm just kind of showing you very quickly in Word how to do it. But that's what you need to show on your site plan, where the fireworks are going to be, where your safety area is, where your spectators are going to be. Put distances on here as well. Again, I don't know if you actually draw. You probably can draw lines with. Let's see, can we draw straight lines? Not very easily on here. Say it's easy to do in a graphics package, but you get the idea. So your site plan needs to show where your fireworks are going to be located, where your spectators are going to be, the distance between the spectators and the fireworks. If you have a fallout area, which would normally be at the back, again, it'd be quite difficult to do it on this site because there's not a massive amount of space. It's surrounded by roads, and we'll come on to roads in a minute. The other thing you need to put on here is where you are going to be able to access the site with vehicles that are going to contain your fireworks, and also where the public are going to come in and out of this site. So how do you do that? Again, a site visit, really, really useful way to do it. If you can't do a site visit, you could, as a push, do Google Maps and do the street view. So let's go back to Google Maps here. Let's drag a little person up here. And let's have a look at this field. So again, you can't rely on Google Street Maps because this might be, I mean, this was June 2018. This footage was taken, this image. So things may have changed. These trees are probably likely to have grown. So you can't rely on Google Maps, Google Images, Google Street View alone. Always do a physical site inspection if you can. But we are just looking now where vehicles can access this site and where the public can access it. So let's go around here. So we're looking at, so there's a wall all the way around here. There we go. We do have a vehicle access point there onto the site. In terms of where spectators could access, is there a access point around here? No, there's not. So actually spectators can't access this field anywhere from that site other than that gate. So it might be that that gate is used for you driving your vehicle on so you can offload the fireworks, take your vehicle out. This then may be a spectator entrance and exit. Let's have a look. Let's walk around the other side and see if there's anything, another entrance to the field around here. As I say, this is a public field. You couldn't do fireworks on here even if you risk assessed it without council permission. So just using this example. So there's a tiny little walkway there. That's not going to get many people through in an emergency, is it? You need a wider space than that to be able to get people. If people need to evacuate the site quickly, that's not going to be a suitable way to do it. So let's have a look down here, see if there's anything else. Potentially something there. That looks bricked up. So again, that's not really an entrance exit to that. And then there's another little one there. So again, if I was assessing this site for a firework display, assuming this was a private field, they'll have to climb over the wall. If not, yeah, absolutely. If I was assessing this, assuming this was a private field and I was assessing this for fireworks, given those seem to be the only two, is there a... No, that's just the wall. I was wondering if there's a gap there, but no, there's not. There is potentially, let's have a look, there's a little walkway there. I can't walk down there with Google Images, but Google Street View, but I can pan up. There's no kind of entrance there. So really, from an audience point of view, the only real one was the vehicle entrance on the other side. So immediately that would rule out this as being a suitable site for fireworks. I mean, you know, if you had 20 people there, yeah, fine. But if you had 100 plus, there's no way you could safely get them all off that site quickly if there was an emergency. And yes, it's interesting that 3D Printer Guy has noted that the wall is quite low in places as well. That's something we'd cover in the risk assessment. So even though this place isn't suitable, we're going to risk assess it anyway and kind of look at all these things that make it not suitable. And hopefully you guys will find that useful. So let's come out of the street view. So we know there was a vehicle access point kind of here. So again, on our Word document, we can sort of label that there. So if we get like, what colour pen should we use for that? Let's use a blue. And then we could sort of put that on there. And again, we do a key, or we'd put a little note on there, say vehicle access there. So I say the key things on your site plan, it's always good to have a visual site plan. Where your fireworks are going to be, where your spectators are going to be, they're the two main ones to indicate there's adequate separation between them and that your firing site isn't close to any public roads. You have to, by law, you can't set off fireworks more than or closer than 15 metres to the centre of a highway or a road. So if we go back to Google Earth here, Google Maps rather, this is the centre of a highway here. So I would have to do fireworks a minimum of 15 metres away. Obviously, if I'm doing Cat 3 stuff, you need to be 25 metres anyway. If I was just doing Cat 2, which only needs like 8 metres, you could do it a bit closer, but you have to maintain 15 metres from the centre of a road. So if the road, like this road here, has more lanes in here, it would be 15 metres from the centre of this road. Okay, the centre line. Same with the motorway. If it's number of lanes on the motorway, it's the centre of a motorway. So 15 metres. So that's the site plan. That's basically what it needs to incorporate. I do a site plan on everything that I do displays for, and include like a Google Maps visual on that screenshot. I will then talk, I say, do a key or talk about what's actually on that plan. So if we just have a look, and let's come out my drawing tool. There we go. Oh, how do we come out of that? I don't know how we come out of our... There we go. Right. So again, here's a bit of an example site plan. So spectator area is shaded blue on the enclosed plan. Well, actually, we did it yellow, didn't we? Entrance and egress points of this area are indicated in cyan. So again, put your entrance and egress points on. Entrance points A and B are to be cordoned off by and stewarded to prevent access. Solid orange line, yeah, crowd barrier. That's something else we missed, isn't it? Show where your crowd barrier is going to be. Now, usually it'll be at the edge of your spectator area. So let's draw that on. Let's go to draw. Let's go for, I don't know, orange. And we'll draw. Again, it's not going to be very straight. But a crowd barrier like that. Never do a crowd barrier. I'm going to go a little bit off topic here. Never do a concave crowd barrier. What do I mean by concave? Let me see if that will let me do a pen again. Right. They're going to let me do it. Okay, so never do a crowd barrier that's concave like that. Okay, either do it flat or do it convex. Anybody know the reason why we don't do crowd barriers concave like that? I'm curious to see if anybody knows. It's not a test, but I'm just curious to see if anybody knows why you shouldn't do a crowd barrier concave like that. So let's undo that. Say the other way you could do it to a... Let me draw again. It's thinking about it. Maybe I need to select the pen again. There we go. You could do crowd barriers like that. I mean, obviously that's not very straight. That would be okay, but never do them concave. Let's see if anybody see if anybody in the chat, when it catches up, can work out why we don't do them concave. So let's put this back in kind of straight. Oh, we need to select the pen again. That's not a bad straight freehand line, that is it? Okay, so right, how do I stop the pen from being a pen? There we go, press escape. Okay, so let's go back to my blurb, example blurb. So yeah, so talk about the site plan. So include a visual site plan, reference things on it, say where the entrances, exits are, where stewards are going to be, where the crowd barrier is going to be, where the safety distances are going to be. In terms of safety distances, I know somebody asked me this question last week. They showed me their risk assessment. It had a very precise figure for where the crowd barrier was going to be in relation to the fireworks. It was like, I don't know, 36.7 or something like that. Whilst you should be, let's go back to the camera. Whilst you should be specific and not ambiguous in your risk assessments, at the same time, don't be too specific. If you put a specific value in, 36.7 meters, and you say your fireworks are going to be, or your crowd's going to be 36.7 meters away from your fireworks, you need to ensure that they are going to be 36.7 meters, not 36.5 or 36.8. So don't be that specific. When you're giving distances to spectators, say spectators will be at least 36 meters away. That gives you a little bit more wiggle room rather than saying 36.7 or something like that. So that's something to bear in mind with that. And also note if there's any obstacles, so like here, a large tree behind the firing site which overhangs in the firing area. Again, this doesn't relate to this specific field we're doing. This is just to show you what kind of I include in my site plan section of my risk assessment document. So let's go on. And nobody seems to know about the concave thing. So the reason we don't do it concaved is it can actually cause, it's less of an issue really when you've just got orange crowd barrier, you know, the kind of plastic barrier. If you've got a proper crowd barrier and you do it concave, you could cause a crush. If people all rush forward, they could all crush. So don't do concave. Again, if you're just doing like orange kind of plastic fencing tape, I'm sure it has a proper name. You guys know what I'm talking about. You see it at firework displays all the time. You have road pins in the ground. You unwind this kind of orange netting, if you like, across. That's less of an issue because that's not going to, crowd are not going to crush against that. But even so, it's good practice. Don't do it concave because it can cause pinch points. Adam says, hello, I'm a little bit late, but I'm here now and watch till the end. Thanks, Adam. Welcome in. I say you'll be able to watch the start of the stream again later, so you can catch up on anything you missed. We're talking about risk assessments for firework displays and how to do them, how I do them in quite a simple way, because you can get quite complex with risk assessments. I like to do it quite concisely, but still kind of covering all the key areas. So let's go back to my risk assessment. So just a quick recap. So we've got a kind of an event overview on the first page with kind of key details about the event. We've got information about the event particulars, stewarding arrangements, first aid arrangements, whose responsibility are those, effectively. Just doesn't have to be a big section. If they're not your responsibility, just say that the venue's responsibility. Just make it clear in your risk assessment whose responsibility it is. Site plan, following your site visit, grab that from Google Maps, Google Street View or whatever. Put it in, label it all up, give it a key. The other useful thing that it is good to put on here as well is a direction, a compass. Indicate which way is north, because that can come into its own later on in your risk assessment when you start talking about wind direction and wind speed. So it's just a good thing to label up on your site plan as well. So now we're going to move into hazards and risks, which is kind of like the rest of the risk assessment and actually working out what we need to consider when we do that. So to do that, I use quite a simple matrix. Now, again, there's not just a single way of doing this. Everybody has their own different matrix. Some can be massive, some can be quite small. I will show you the matrix that I use and I'll talk you through it. So this is my risk matrix, and this is how I risk assess things on my firework display. So along the top here, this is, I say here, you can't actually see my mouse pointer. Tell you what, if I put it on, let's put it in my Word document, then hopefully you might be able to see. You can see my mouse pointer there. There we go. So potential severity. So we basically have severity and likelihood. So likelihood is how likely is something to happen, how often will it happen, how frequently will it happen, and severity is if it were to happen, how serious is it. So this is my risk matrix. So everything that we put in the risk assessment, we basically have a risk factor for it, which we ascertain from this table here. So if something's highly unlikely to happen, and if it did happen, it's not really going to cause a lot of damage. When we talk about harmful, you can go one stage further and split this out into the severity of harm to people and the severity of harm to structures, buildings, things like that. I kind of combine it all in one and then separate it out a little bit more in my risk assessment later on. So I kind of keep this quite simple. So for the time being, we're just going to talk about severity of harm to people. So likelihood, highly unlikely, unlikely, or likely. Again, you can do this. I have seen ones that have like 10 different levels and it gets, massive matrices. This is quite a compact way of doing it. So likelihood, highly unlikely, likely, or unlikely or likely. Severity, slightly harmful, harmful, or extremely harmful. And I number those 1, 2, 3 in ascendingness of harmfulness. In ascendingness, is that a word? I don't know. And the same for likelihood. So highly unlikely is 1, unlikely is 2, likely is 3. And then we multiply those together to get these numbers in the actual grid. And this gives us our risk factor, if you like. So if something is highly unlikely to happen, and if it did, it would only be slightly harmful, we call that a trivial risk of 1. Okay, if something's highly unlikely to happen, but if it happened, it would be harmful. So let's give us some examples of that. So slightly harmful might be, let's say a cardboard tube falls on someone, it doesn't do them any harm. They're not injured. They don't need to go to hospital. It's slightly harmful. They might have a little bruise or a little burn or something like that. Something that doesn't require hospital treatment or first aid treatment. We say that would be slightly harmful. Something that's harmful would be something that causes an injury, but not a life-threatening injury. It could be a burn. You've maybe got to go to hospital for it. Extremely harmful would be a life-changing event, so death or serious bodily harm or something like that. As I say, you can split this into more levels. I just keep it to these 3 just for simplicity. But I say I have seen ones that go to like 10 levels of severity and 10 levels of likelihood, which gets quite complex. I like to keep it simple. So if something's highly unlikely to happen, but if it happened, it's harmful. Well, you could say that's tolerable because really the chances of it happening is so small that it's a tolerable risk. The same if it's unlikely to happen but be slightly harmful, that is also a tolerable risk. Then we move up into the moderate risks. So if something is highly unlikely to happen, but if it happened, it would be life-changing. That could be a substantial or a moderate risk. Well, we've put moderate here for highly unlikely. If it's something that's unlikely but possible, it's a substantial risk. If it's something that's likely to happen and likely to cause, serious injury or death, then that's going to be an intolerable risk. So hopefully you can see it. And I've color coded that as well. So green, yellow, orange, kind of darker orange and yellow. So for all the risks we're going to talk about, all the hazards, I assess them against this matrix. So we'll keep kind of flashing this matrix up to refer back to, and hopefully that will be helpful for you guys. So in fact, let's put that matrix on. There we go. Okay, so the next thing I do, the rest of my, let's switch back to Word. So I then basically just do a table like this for all my different hazards. So I'll do this kind of table for each hazard. So I'll identify a hazard. I will do an assessment of the hazard. I will work out what its initial risk is before I do anything to mitigate it. I'll then do a section on mitigation. So what am I actually going to do to mitigate, reduce that risk? And then if all those mitigations are implemented, what does it bring the risk factor down to? So you'll see here we've got an initial risk and a residual risk. So this hazard here, this example hazard, the hazard is proximity to roads and vehicles. So you assess that based on your site. So if we go back to our browser here, our Google Maps, so is there proximity to public roads? Yes, there is, because we're surrounded on this site here by a road and this site here. It's a B road, so slightly less of a risk than a high traffic A road or motorway, but nonetheless, we are still in proximity to public roads there. And this Lum Lane here looks like it's not even a B road, but again, so we are in close proximity to roads, so that is a hazard. So we need to assess the risk of that hazard. So let's go back to here. So again, this risk assessment here doesn't actually relate to this example field we're doing, but on this one, the venue is surrounded by all four sides by public highways. So on this, it's surrounded by, on two sides, by public highways, two of which are A roads. Well, then they're not in this case, one of which is a B road. To call this parking. So we're basically sort of describing the road conditions around, well, not the condition of the road, but the proximity of the roads, whether they're A roads, motorways, cul-de-sacs, B roads, the type of roads. And we basically say the assessment is fireworks can be a distraction to drivers, smoke can drift onto roads causing visibility issues, and falling debris can be a hazard to nearby parked cars. So there doesn't look like there's any parking on this B road here, but potentially there is. Well, we saw on the street view, didn't we? Let's go back to street view over here. There is parking here on this bit of road, so we are in close proximity to parked cars. We are in close proximity to roads, so that's the hazard. So is there a risk? So let's go back to our risk matrix. In fact, let's bring that up so you have to keep scrolling. So what's the likelihood of harm occurring to vehicles given how close they are? Well, I'd say it's unlikely. Where we're going to do the fireworks on our firing site, it was more than 25 metres away from roads and cars. So I would say it's unlikely. Is it highly unlikely? No, because there are still cars in the vicinity, parked cars in the vicinity, so it's not highly unlikely. Is it probable that material will hit cars? Well, hopefully not if we're only doing small fireworks, so we could say it's unlikely. If something did hit a car or smoke did drive on, go onto the roads, which is actually potentially more of an issue than just something falling on a car. So let's assume smoke. So smoke drifted onto the roads. Could it cause visibility issues? Yes. Could it cause a crash? Could it cause an accident? Well, again, looking at our roads on this particular site, there is a bit of a junction kind of here where a number of roads intersect. So, you know, smoke drifted on it. Again, this would be behind our firing site. So assuming our wind direction is in this direction, blowing the fireworks away from the spectators, it could blow smoke onto this junction here. So there is a bit of a, you know, there's a moderate risk of that happening. So if we go back to our matrix again, so we're saying it's unlikely that smoke will cause an issue or debris will fall on a car, but if it did happen, it could be moderately harmful because, you know, it could cause visibility issues. So we would then put that as our initial risk before we've done any mitigations. So we would have an initial risk here. It would actually be moderate risk, so it'd be a factor of 4 for this particular site. So then we look at how we mitigate that. How do we bring that risk down? Obviously, if it's a trivial risk, we don't need to do anything about it, really. If it's a tolerable risk, if we can do something about it, great. If it's a moderate or substantial risk, we really need to do something about it. If it's an intolerable risk, we have to do something about it because intolerable risks are completely unacceptable, as are substantial ones, really. So we have to bring it down with some mitigations. So I can do a section then here on the mitigations. So the mitigations is make sure the firing area is more than X meters away from roadside parking. Make sure the proposed firing area is at least X amount meters away from the centre of any public road. If it's partially obscured, yeah, put it there. So yeah, if there's a line of trees, that's potentially going to diffuse the smoke. So one of the mitigations, if we go back to our Google Maps here, you can see actually there is kind of a line of trees here. So if we do have smoke drifting this way, these trees are going to diffuse it to a degree. So that's kind of a mitigation. Doesn't mean it's going to eliminate it, but it will potentially just diffuse it a bit. So we can sort of say by making sure our fireworks are far enough away, we could also say that actually we're not going to use any smoke effects. We're not going to use we're going to use low smoke fireworks, or we're not going to use any fireworks whose sole purpose is to generate a lot of smoke. So the things we could do that, and then we can basically bring that risk factor down to something more suitable. So if we go back to our matrix, so we said initially it was going to be unlikely but potentially harmful, so moderate risk of 4. We can bring the likelihood down to be highly unlikely if we cut out smoke effects, move the fireworks further away, things like that. So we could then bring that down to a 2 as a tolerable risk. I hope you guys are all with me so far. So I basically do that kind of same thing for all the different hazards, all the different risks that I can think of. So proximity to pavements and pedestrians, kind of similar, but again, we're talking now about the issue of pedestrians being close and being within the fallout area. So mitigations here, making sure your firing area is more than X meters away from the closest pavement. Make sure it's well stewarded. One of the things that somebody picked up, 3D printer guy picked up, if we go back to the browser here, and let's put our little person on the street here. This wall in places, I think like down here, so look down here, it's actually quite low. People could jump over that. So that is something to bear in mind with. You could actually get spectators who are not spectating in the main spectator area on the field, but are actually standing along this pavement. So could that become an issue if you get too many people there, the field's full, you can't have any more people on the field, people start watching from the pavement here, and you know that gets 2, 3, 4 people rows back and starts encroaching on the road. So that's something to be mindful of as well. So, you know, there's all these things you can do. So, you know, one of the mitigations for that would be making sure that it's stewarded, making sure that you have stewards along this road to make sure that people aren't spectating in this area, and encourage them to go to the main spectator area to make sure they're not kind of spilling out onto the road, to keep the roads clear, things like that. So there are things you could do mainly with stewarding to mitigate that particular risk there. Let's have a look at another one. So the proximity to buildings and structures. So we looked at the proximity to roads, pavements, pedestrians. Let's look at the proximity to buildings and other structures. So let's go back to the overview on here. So where we're doing this, what have we got nearby that is of concern? Key things you're looking out for here are things like petrol stations. Obviously, you don't want to do fireworks anywhere near a petrol station. You don't want a rocket landing in a petrol station forecourt. It's just a definite no-no. So I'm going to zoom out a bit here. Basically have a bit of a pan around. Make sure there's nothing of concern. So things like petrol stations, storage areas, self-storage places, things like that. Quite often people can store stuff there that perhaps shouldn't be. Rubbish tips, waste tips, things like that. Tall buildings. Again, I don't think there's anything particularly. I can actually see, in fact, here. I mean, this is a bit far enough away. That looks like that might be. Let's just put a person on the street here and see. It looks like there might be a chimney there somewhere. Let's have a bit of a. Yeah, there's a chimney. Quite a tall chimney there. Now, that is far enough away. That's there. My firing site is down here. So that's not close enough to be a concern. But these are all the kind of things you need to look out for when you are risk assessing in terms of proximity to buildings and structures. Even if there's nothing particularly close, if you've got a really tall building, you might have like a high-rise residential apartment complex. Adam says, how many stewards do you need to have for your display, for your size of your apartment? It will very much depend on your site. It's very difficult to give a one kind of, oh, you need X number of stewards to X number of people. It will also depend on your site and the access and egress and how easy that is. Obviously, if you've got, let's say you've got a big field that has 2 entrance points versus a field that has got 5 or 6 entry points, even if you've got the same amount of spectators, you're going to need more stewards on the field that has 5 or 6 entry points, aren't you? So it's really difficult to give a one size fits all because it will depend on your site as well as the number of people you have in attendance. So quite a difficult one to answer that one, I'm afraid. I guess you can never have too many stewards. I think that's a good way of looking at it. Okay, so proximity to buildings. So again, there's not particularly a real hazard there. If we had a building on this, well, we do actually have a building, don't we, in the corner of this field. Let's have a little bit of a closer look at that building and see how high it is, see what it is. Okay, so it's a locksmith's there. It's not a particularly big building. You know, if that was like a car garage potentially, an MOT centre, something like that, I'd be a bit more concerned because you could have vapours and fumes and things around there. So, but this is okay. The other thing to check with your buildings as well, check they've not got thatched roofs. I mean, most buildings these days don't, but if you're doing a display out in the country, obviously don't do fireworks anywhere near a building that has a thatched roof. Kind of goes without saying, but again, if there is a thatched roof, you need to risk assess it. You need to make sure you've identified that in your risk assessment and adequately addressed it. So proximity to buildings and structures is a good one to look at. And again, how you minimise those risks. Well, again, make sure that your fireworks are X number of metres away from the buildings. And also be careful if you're using any angled effects in your display that you're not angling them towards buildings. So those are the key risks and hazards really in terms of proximity to buildings and other structures. So petrol stations, be especially careful of that. In fact, actually, whilst we're talking about proximity to things, we should probably also talk about some other things that you need to be mindful of when it comes to proximity. Oh, but let me just see what 3D printer guy's saying. This might sound silly, but you could also include on the risk assessment the chance of the public who could be watching near the wall could ignore the stewards as they have no power on public land. Yeah, and that's a very good point. If you've got a large audience at your displays, how are stewards or organisers going to communicate with that audience? You need a PA system. You need a reliable PA system. You need a PA system that's audible, that's suitable for the audience size you have. One thing I will say, and again, this is probably not, you'd potentially be outsourcing your audio system to someone else, maybe, or doing it yourself. All I will say, one little tip, is if you've got a PA system, if there's no power on site, obviously you need a generator, things like that, always have a backup power supply for your PA system. Because if you lose power to your PA system and there's an emergency and you need to communicate with your audience, you've no way of doing it. So always have some form of a backup generator, backup UPS, something like that for your PA, so that you can make emergency announcements in the event of a loss of power elsewhere. So that's something to be aware of. And again, you could put that in your risk assessment. And one of the mitigations would be, your risk would be, communicating with the audience, how you communicate, ensuring there's enough loudspeakers, ensuring the loudspeakers are audible and there's clarity. But one of the mitigations, again, ensuring there's backup power and things like that. So, but we were just talking about structures and other things you need to be mindful of if you are in close proximity to. So let's go back to our Google Street View. So we talked about petrol stations. We talked about tall structures, chimneys, blocks of flats, high-rise, things like that, storage areas, waste recycling, rubbish tips, things like that. Other things you need to be mindful of are airports. So it is actually illegal to let off fireworks within a 3-mile radius of effectively the centre of the runway. It's actually the ARP or the aerodrome reference point, but that's usually the centre of the runway. So you can't at any time do fireworks within 3 miles, a radius of 3 miles of an airport. Now, I say this example field I've got is in Bradford. Let's zoom out. I know there's no airports nearby here. I think Leeds Bradford Airport will be somewhere up here somewhere. I don't even know where it is, but it's way up here somewhere. Let's see if we can find it. Well, let's type in Leeds Bradford Airport. Let's see where it is. There it is. So where was that in conjunction? So our field was down here. The runway's there, so we are well clear of that. So, but let's just zoom in on Leeds Bradford Airport, and use that as an example. So the centre of the runway we can take as being kind of here, this point here. So within a 3-mile radius of here, I mean 3 miles is going to be more than that, you can't do fireworks. It's just not permitted. It's not allowed. So you can't do it within 3 mile radius. You also can't do it within a 10 mile radius, well, a 10 mile line of sight of the runway. So this runway runs this way here. So for 10 miles in this direction, you can't do fireworks, and that's within a kilometre's width, if you like. So there's a corridor. You can't do fireworks. I can show you actually. Let me see if I've got a graphic. Yeah, let me bring this up. Okay, so you can't do fireworks within a 3 mile radius of a centre of a runway. You can't do it within 10 miles of the extended runway centre line on either side to a distance of 500 metres either side. So if you want to do fireworks within that, you would have to get permission from the Civil Aviation Authority. They will most likely say no if you want to do it within 3 miles. I have known displays that happen within this 10 mile approach corridor to the runway, and you basically do have to get special permission from the CAA. You'll have to be in constant communication with the CAA on your event day. They will tell you go, no go at a certain time, so you won't be able to dictate to them when you start your display, and they will dictate to you. So it gets really complex if you're doing it within that 10 mile corridor of a runway, but it is possible, but you are in the hands of the CAA, and if the CAA say no, then no, it's not going to happen. CAA may say yes, okay, we'll give you provisional permission, and then they may decide on the actual day itself, on the event, no, you can't do it. So there's all kinds of risks involved in doing that, but that's just something to be mindful of when you're looking at your site and assessing a site for its suitability for fireworks. So no within a 3 mile radius, difficult within that 10 mile corridor of an airport, but potentially doable if you've got permission from the Civil Aviation Authority or the CAA. Other ones to be mindful of is train lines, train tracks. You can't do fireworks. Well, you can. Okay, you have to notify the rail track and rail operator if you are doing fireworks within a 50 meters of a train line, basically, or a station. So let's go back to our field. Are there any train lines within a 50 meter? Well, I can see there's a train line. Hang on, let's get this back because you're just watching me at the moment, not watching my screen. There we go. Right, so here's my site here. There is a train line here. Obviously, that's more than 50 meters away. We can right click and we can go measure distance. And we can measure distance to that. I mean, I can see that it's a lot more. So yeah, that's 500 meters. So we don't need to notify them. If we were doing fireworks within 50 meters of a railway line, you need to notify rail track and the rail operator. You have to notify them both. So you have to notify the rail track owner and the rail operator, which gets confusing and gets quite complex because quite often, rail track tend to own the actual track, but you might get different train operators using that line. You'd have to notify them all. It gets really complex. So ideally, don't do fireworks within 50 meters of a operation. And I must say, it's operational railway. If you've got a disused railway line, that's different. We're talking operational railways. So, and again, they could say no, in which case you wouldn't be able to do it. Similar as well with inland waterways, so canals, rivers. You can't do fireworks within 50 meters of a canal or a river without notifying and getting approval from either, I think it's the Canal and Rivers Trust for canals, and let's see who'll do rivers. Probably the inland waterways, I don't know, but whoever is responsible for that stretch of water, if it's a river or a canal, then you need permission from them, and you have to notify them as well. So lots of things to take into account when you are trying to find a suitable site to do fireworks. Okay, let's clear the measurements on that. Let's go back to our risk assessment. So smoke and debris. Some fireworks generate an amount of smoke and debris which can drift depending on wind speed and direction. This can be especially hazardous if a significant amount of smoke drifts onto a busy main road. Yeah, we touched on that earlier. It can also be hazardous if smoke or debris drift into a spectator area. So how do you mitigate that? Well, you look at the wind forecast for the day and the wind direction. Obviously, you might have to cancel if the wind speed and the direction is too much. It's going to blow material in a direction you don't want. So it's going to blow stuff into your audience. You don't want that. If there's a risk it's going to be quite smoky and it's going to blow it all and it's all going to hang over a road, you don't want to do that either. Other things you can do to mitigate: fire a small rocket or a small fountain or something like that and see which way that blows. Firework rockets will always tend to track into the wind. So this is one of the reasons I don't use rockets on any of my public displays, because they can be quite erratic. They track into the wind. So if you've got a slight breeze blowing towards your audience, the rocket stick could very well land in your audience, which you don't want. So, but it's a good way to test wind speed direction by firing a rocket straight up and see kind of where it goes. Obviously beforehand, before your spectators are there, just give it a go. But also bear in mind that even if you test it a few hours before your spectators arrive, the wind speed, the wind direction could change between that point and when you do your display. It may even change mid-display as well. So another mitigation is, here we go, if the wind speed or direction become a cause for concern prior to the display may be scaled back. By that we mean you might remove some of your higher level effects. So if you've got some big cakes and they're going to have a big hang time in the sky, you might want to cut those out so that those hang time things don't just drift into your audience. So another mitigation, we mentioned earlier, no pure smoke effects. So we can reduce the risk that way. Wind speed and direction will be continually assessed in the run-up to the display. We just mentioned that. Where possible, so something else you can do, you can actually angle your cakes back a bit. I showed you how to do that on one of my other streams from my garage. Was it a few days ago, last week, this week? I can't remember which one it was. When you put your cake on a board, you can put like a staking underneath and just angle that cake very slightly away from your spectators. So even though your cake is in the same place, its effects will go further away from the audience than if it went straight up. So it just gives you that little bit more of a safety distance if there is a bit of a breeze. So that's a mitigation you can use if you're concerned that smoke and debris could drift into your audience. Okay, so and of course the other mitigation for smoke and debris is making sure there's adequate first aid provisions on site. Okay, next one, a fire in general. Obviously fire with fireworks, yeah, of course, it's a risk. If you're hand firing, obviously there's a risk that you are going to have naked flames on your firing site. There's a risk that could accidentally ignite fireworks. Burning or smouldering fireworks, which do happen, could cause a fire. So things to look at when you're assessing this: are there any hazardous materials on site? Is there a container on the site filled with paraffin or propane or something like that? So things like that, or gas canisters or fuel or things like that. So those are things you need to look at when you're looking at your site. And that's why a site survey is really good, because you won't pick up those things necessarily using Google Maps, because if Google Maps, the imagery might be 5, 6, 7 years old. Since then, there might have been a storage container put on the site with all sorts of stuff. I've had that before. So you need to assess that. So how can you mitigate those kind of things? Well, you can make sure there's no loose rubbish on the grounds. So one of the displays I did once, the venue was having some building work, and there was a skip left on site, and that skip was filled with rubbish, building materials and stuff like that, and it was fairly close to the firing site. Obviously, if a firework had landed in that, it could have caused a fire. So one of the mitigations you can put in is making sure that the venue is clear, or the site is clear of any loose rubbish, building materials, things like that. So also in your mitigations, when we talk about fire, what are your firefighting provisions? Have you got water fire extinguishers? Whereabouts are they going to be located? State those in your risk assessment as your mitigation for fire. So you might have a fire extinguisher either side of your site. Water fire extinguishers, of course. You might have buckets of water. Where are they? Who's providing those? Whose responsibility is it to ensure that they are there? So it's really important when we do risk assessments that we look at whose responsibility all these things are. It's all well and good saying, yes, fire extinguishers will be on site. Whose responsibility is it to ensure that they are placed where they are going to be according to your risk assessment? So Let's have a look. What else? And of course, yeah, things like no smoking, no vaping in the firing site. It kind of goes without saying, but again, just put it in your risk assessment as a mitigation to reduce the chances of fire. There's not going to be any smoking on site. And that is something else to be mindful. Just going back for a minute on when we talked about roads and pedestrians and pavements. If you've got, if I was doing fireworks back here, for example, it's possible that a spectator walking past here or just a random person walking could be smoking, could flick their cigarette over, it could land in the firing site and ignite fireworks. So again, that's something to be mindful. A mitigation for that, of course, you do your fireworks further away from a pavement. 3D printing guy says, would a generator for power also be classed as a risk because of the fuel? Yes. And again, it depends on who is providing that generator as to who needs to risk assess it. If it's your generator and you're providing it, you need to cover that in your risk assessment. If you are hiring in a generator, that should come with instructions, assessments on it, but again, you might just have to include that in your own risk assessment as to how you're going to manage that safely. So it might be, for example, yes, you're going to have a generator on site, but the fuel is not going to be, spare fuel is going to be stored somewhere else, and you state where that fuel is going to be. The fuel is not just going to be left in a plastic container, plastic bottle next to the generator. It's going to be safely locked away, stored away somewhere safe. So yeah, you do need to risk assess that. But if somebody else is providing the generator and setting it up and it's nothing to actually do with what you're focused on with the fireworks, let them risk assess it. You don't need to worry about that if you're not responsible for that generator. If you're responsible for that generator, yes, of course you do need to risk assess that. The other thing in relation to fire as well is bonfires. Quite a lot of firework displays have bonfires with them. Quite a few actually don't anymore. It's a bit of a dying tradition. More and more are not, and the reason they're not is because they're quite difficult to adequately risk assess. Well, you can risk assess them, but they're quite difficult to do safely. If we go back to our browser and look at this fictitious field, well, it's a real field, but for a fictitious display, I can't really see anywhere on this site that we could safely do a bonfire. Because normally you would do a bonfire. I mean, you wouldn't do a bonfire in the middle here, because then you'd have your spectators watching your fireworks through a bonfire, which isn't great. So you'd have to do your bonfire towards the edges. But where would you do it? Let's look at our kind of little mocked up plan here. Let's go back to Word. So we've got spectators here. We've got our fireworks there. There's not really anywhere on here you could do a bonfire. You can't obviously do a bonfire within your spectator area, so it has to be somewhere else. You could do it off to one side here, but then you are very close to the road here. You're very close to these trees. You obviously don't want to do it too close to your fireworks. So I don't think it's actually possible to do a bonfire on here. But if you've got a bigger site and you're risk assessing that and you are doing a bonfire, obviously what are the risks associated with that? Well, the risks associated with a bonfire are sparks and things like that could go and ignite your fireworks. So you could mitigate that by ensuring that the bonfire is X number of meters away from your fireworks. The other risks, of course, burns to spectators, heat from the bonfire. So you could mitigate that by ensuring that the bonfire is X meters away from your spectators, ensuring the bonfire is not above a certain height, in terms of when you're stacking all the pallets or whatever you're burning. Talk about, assess how that bonfire is going to be lit. How is it going to be lit in a safe way? I've seen people, pour paraffin over it and light it and it goes woof. Obviously, that's not a particularly safe way of lighting a bonfire. It's effective because it gets everything lit, but if you are going to do it that way, when are you going to light the bonfire? Is it going to be before spectators arrive? Is it going to be when spectators could be close by? How are you going to manage that? How are you going to manage that fire? If that fire gets out of control, gets too big, how are you going to put that out? Obviously, you probably need to call the fire brigade. So is there going to be access to your fire brigade? So again, if we go back to our... Hi Downscale, welcome in. If we go back to our field here, we have already said that we can't really do a bonfire here. But let's say that we did do a bonfire and we did it kind of over here. And it gets out of control. Our fire brigade actually could come on this street view here, just on this little street here. Let's go back to our... Could pull up on this road, and if our bonfire was just the other side of this fence, they could reach to put it out. If, though, we did the bonfire kind of right in the middle of this field here, the fire engine might actually need to get onto site. Now, again, this is not a very big field. Their hoses will probably reach. But let's just assume for a minute this was a massive field. The fire brigade may actually need to come on site. So in which case, our one entrance point there, we would need to keep this clear. We'd have to have this steward. We'd have to make sure that this isn't blocked so that emergency vehicles could get onto this field if necessary. And actually, on the point of that, if emergency vehicles do need to come onto a firing field, they shouldn't just come on themselves. They need to be given the all clear from you. If you're in charge of the fireworks, they need to be given the all clear from you that actually the fireworks, you've shut down your firing system. There's nothing else going to go off, because the worst thing that could happen is fire engines, paramedics, ambulance or whatever all rush onto your site and you've still got fireworks going off or something unsafe there. So you need to, the stewards need to make sure that people are not allowed onto that site unless they give you the okay. Obviously, if you're incapacitated and you can't make that call, well, yes, someone else will have to make that call. That fire brigade or police or whatever can come onto your site. Bambography, good evening. Sorry, I'm going to just join, but I'll listen back tomorrow. Yeah, you're welcome. Welcome in, Bambography. Thank you for being here. I say it's not going to be like a 4-hour stream, although I know we have been going an hour and a bit now. So, but hopefully this is useful stuff for you guys. Hopefully you're picking up a few little things that you can maybe use in your own risk assessments. And I say, do post your comments, your thoughts in the chat as well. If you risk assess things slightly differently, let me know. Say there's not like a one size fits all. It's just the way I do it. That's quite simple and straightforward. So, okay, so we're looking up to fire, risks of fire. So we've kind of covered those. Bonfires, yeah, we've kind of covered those. The other risk that it's worth talking about is risk of burns. So there exists a potential risk of burns from fireworks, a fire pit or a bonfire, whatever, sparklers. So sparklers is one you need to risk assess. Most public displays will say don't bring fireworks or sparklers onto site. That's a very good policy. The last thing you want is people in the crowd setting off fireworks. Sparklers, people think, oh, well, the sparklers are less of a risk. It's okay, we can bring them onto site. It's not going to harm anyone. Well, sparklers burn very, very hot and they remain hot for a long time. And if you're in the middle of a spectator area, you light a sparkler, okay, you've got enough space to potentially do that. But then what are you going to do with your spent sparkle? It's going to be red hot. No bins around, you're just going to put it on the ground. Somebody could step on it, burn themselves. So it's a good idea to state that, don't bring sparklers or fireworks onto site. I do know some events where the stewards, again, if they've been SIS trained, certified, they can actually do like a stop and search and search people's bags and stop them from bringing fireworks in. But again, how effective is that? I mean, packets of sparklers, you could easily just put down your trousers, and if they pat you down, they're not going to find them. So you've got to kind of rely on people to do that. Or what you can do, the other way of dealing with sparklers is to actually allow sparklers, but to create a dedicated area for sparklers. So, for example, on our, let's go back to our fictitious field again here. So we were going to do a spectator area at the back here. We could actually cordon off a little bit of that area at the front, do it dedicated, so separately cordoned off, and make it a sparkler area. So if people do want to bring sparklers, they bring sparklers, but they light them in that sparkler area. And in that sparkler area, again, you'd steward it. You could also have buckets of water available so that when they've got their spent sparkler, they can just dip it in the bucket. I do actually know some displays where they actually give out sparklers for free, so they have a dedicated sparkler area. Make sure it's stewarded. Make sure, put a big sign up saying sparkler area or whatever. Because sparklers are so inexpensive, you buy them in bulk. Some displays actually give them out, and that's great because it encourages their safe use. They're used within a controlled area where there's means to safely dispose of them. So there's things you can do like that to mitigate the risk of sparklers. So Northeast Pyro were the place they do shows where I hide in the trees to get as close as I can. Security walking around with torches in the trees. We got found out last year. Yeah, so I mean, I used to do that. I used to go to a public display near me that was held in a school grounds, but it was right next to a public park which had a golf course. So I would sneak onto the golf course and just lie on the golf course and look up and watch all the fireworks. It was great. I was really close. In hindsight, not the best thing to do because that was the fallout area as well. But yeah, that's something to bear in mind with your stewarding though. If you've got, again, it's not an issue on this fictitious field really because there's nowhere people could hide. But if you were doing this on a field that had, a wooded area at the back or a forest or a golf course or some kind of open space, it's worth trying to steward that if you can. Again, if it's a private golf club, you're not going to be able to traipse your stewards over that. So there's a limit to what you can do. But if it's part of the park, if there's a forest in the park, a wooded area, yeah, have some people patrolling that with torches, just checking nobody's in there. That's especially important if that area is your fallout area. You should always try and designate an area for fallout. Fallout is basically where spent product is going to land. So if you've got rockets going up, where do you want your rocket sticks to land? If you've got cakes going up, where do you want all the little cardboard tubes or plastic tubes in some fireworks? Where do you want them to land? Again, you need to sort of design that area based on your wind conditions and things like that. So yeah, it's good to try and have that stewarded if you can. But again, also don't put your stewards at risk. If you've got a fallout area, you don't necessarily want your stewards kind of walking through that because then they're at risk as well. So, and that's something else you can do in your risk assessment as well. I keep mine quite simple, but you can break it down further. So you can do a risk to public, you can do a risk to property, buildings, structures. You can do a risk to people that are working on the event. So other pyrotechnicians, stewards, people who might be the other side of the crowd barrier. So you've got your crowd on one side, the other side of your crowd barrier, you might have stewards walking up and down the barrier. Okay, well, you need to risk assess that. What's going to stop them from walking closer towards the fireworks as opposed to hugging the barrier? So it's those kind of things that you need to consider. Mammography, I'm one of those stewards for a local display on Saturday. Well, that's good. I love it when you get stewards that kind of know what they're doing about fireworks, have a bit of a kind of common sense. I go to so many displays where the stewards haven't really got a clue about fireworks and just kind of not really bothered about being there. And the other thing I'll say about stewarding, whilst we're talking about stewarding, is it's important that your stewards are there to steward, not to watch the firework display. I've been to firework displays where the stewards are actually so in awe and mesmerised by the fireworks that they're not really paying attention to the crowd. So your stewards shouldn't actually be watching the firework display. They should be doing their job of stewarding. If you've got any that are kind of looking at the fireworks and watching them, go and have a word with them or go and have a word with their supervisor and say, look, this person's not stewarding properly. Yeah, we got hit with lots of hot ash. Yes, absolutely. Mammography says, I take the approach of saying, I'm not trying to stop you being sneaky. I'm trying to stop you getting hurt. It usually makes people move. Yeah, and that's the thing. If you're a steward and you go up to someone and say, you can't stand there, well, they'll fire back and say, why? If you say, actually, it's not safe to stand here because things are going to fall. But if you go there to this place, it'll be much safer and you get a better view and all these kind of things. So, yeah, it's all about how you kind of approach that. So what we were talking about sparklers, weren't we? Yes, and stewarding fallout areas, and yeah, any areas you can identify where people may try and hide to watch your display, check those out. If your firing site itself, we're not talking about fallout area, if your firing site is near to a wooded area, you need to have stewards patrol that, not during your display, obviously, because it puts them at risk, but 5-10 minutes before your display, you need to have stewards walk through that forest, that wooded area, and make sure that that is clear of people. And they need to then give you the okay that they've checked that and they are clear of that area. And it's then you can then proceed with your fireworks. So, yeah, lots of things to take into account with that. Let's look at another risk. So the ground condition and the quality of the ground. This one's quite often overlooked and it's really important. So what's the surface that you are firing on? Are you firing on grass? Are your spectators going to be on grass? Are your spectators going to be on concrete? If it's grass, what's it like underfoot? Is it level? Is it a level field? Are there dips and mounds and potholes and all those kind of things? If it is grass, what's the weather been like in the run up to it? Has it been raining for days beforehand? Has it been bone dry? Is there a chance it's going to be really muddy and boggy? All these kind of things are all factors you need to look at. when assessing the hazard of the ground quality and conditions. So you need to assess it from the point of view of the ground quality and conditions where you're doing your fireworks, the actual firing area. Is it suitable for fireworks? If it's flooded, you can't do fireworks. If it's really muddy, can you do fireworks? Well, yeah, but you might have to put boards underneath and things like that. So you need to assess it from that point of view, and also from the spectator's point of view. Is it safe to have spectators on a muddy, waterlogged, muddy field in the dark or not? So ground quality and conditions. So those are the things you need to assess. In terms of mitigation, how can you mitigate that? Well, if there's long grass on a site, you could mitigate that by ensuring that the grass is cut. If it's all overgrown, make sure that the grass is cut, in a week or two before the display. Unevenness in the ground, how do you sort that out? Well, if it's grass and there's big holes or small holes, can you fill those in beforehand, or can the venue fill those in? So there's things you can do like that to mitigate it. Things as well, like ensuring there's enough light in the spectator area so that people can actually see the ground conditions, see where they're walking, make sure there's no trip hazards, things like that. So those are the kind of mitigations you can do there. Bulletproof Mum says, has it been stupidly hot and dry all summer? Yeah, and that is another. I mean, that's probably more to do with the fire risk assessment. But yeah, I watched a display last year. I think it was Arley Hall last year, and it was really, really hot. It had been hot for days. It was really, really dry, and so there's a risk that trees and grass and things could catch fire. And so yes, if you're doing something in the summer, it's been really hot and days of dryness, no rain at all, a bit of a drought, hosepipe ban, all those kind of things. Last thing you want is fireworks setting light to grass or trees or things like that. So what mitigations can you do there? Well, what they do at Arley Hall is they actually have a fire truck that goes around and actually sprays the trees and sprays the ground, sprays the grass beforehand. So that's a possibility. Dampen the grass down. And you might need to talk to the fire brigade. You might have to hire in a private fire tender to do that for you. If it's a small area, you might be able to do that yourself with a hose pipe. So there's things like that. So yeah, there is an extra risk if it's dry, and if things could catch fire like that. You might have to change your site layout. Again, if you've got trees either side of your firing site, you might have to cut out some of your angles, make sure things go straight up. In fact, at Arley Hall last year, when it was really hot, even though the private fire tender had dampened down the surroundings, there was some shots that did actually kind of fall into the trees and did set fire, and there was a bit of a fire going in the wooded area that had to be put out during the show. So yeah, there are things to think about there, and again, ways you can mitigate it. So all these risks, none of these risks yet are intolerable. If it's an intolerable risk and you can't do anything about it, your display can't go ahead. Some of these are substantial risks. So for example, the risk, and again, it will change. So the risk of fire, if I'm doing a display next week and it's been raining all week, the risk of trees and grass catching fire is negligible. If we were to look at that on our matrix, the likelihood of grass catching fire, trees catching fire, if it had been raining for a week or two beforehand, it's highly unlikely. If I am doing something, in the height of summer, there's been a drought, the grass is all turned yellow because it's so dry, it's not rained for weeks, well, the likelihood of something catching fire would actually be higher. So again, you can't just do a one risk assessment and then that will do for every single time you're at that same venue. If you're doing different displays at that venue throughout the year, you need to update your risk assessment each and every time. You can't just use the same risk assessment. Even if it's the same venue, things might change. You need to review your risk assessment. You still use the same risk assessment as a template, but you need to go through it and review every single point. Is it still valid? Has anything changed that I need to update on my risk assessment? Bulletproof Mum, sorry, I've just come back, Miss Lowe's. It's okay, you'll be able to rewind the stream and watch this again. Yeah, my garden is rather safe and respect. Yeah, again, if you're doing it in a small garden, again, if you're just doing it for members of your family and friends, you don't really need to risk assess it. It's only if you start doing things for public that you do need to have a risk assessment. But if we're talking about minimising the risk of fire in your back garden and it's dry in the summer, just get the hose pipe out, dampen things down. If there's a hose pipe ban, use watering cans. If you can't do that and you can't minimise the risk, well, you might have to cancel your fireworks, or you might have to do some lower risk fireworks that are not going to cause fire. So I'm thinking like little fountains that you raise up so the sparks don't actually reach the ground, things like that. So there are things you can do in that respect. So we talked about the ground condition and the quality. Are there any trip hazards, ground obstacles within the firing site? If so, how can you minimize those? Can you get rid of those trip hazards? Can you clearly mark them? Can you illuminate them so that people know they're there? So there's things there you can do to make people aware of that. And again, when we talked before about who do these hazards affect, there might be trip hazards not in the spectator area, but in the firing site, in which case it's a trip hazard for anybody that's going to be in the firing site. There might be trip hazards in the safety area where you've got stewards patrolling, in which case it affects them as well. So I say you can make your risk assessment a bit more complex by risk assessing each of these for the different people it could affect. So spectators and people working on the event, and also buildings and structures. I tend to just combine it all into one, but actually state the different people that are at risk in my assessment and the mitigation sections of each risk assessment. The other one you need to be mindful of as well is overhead obstacles within the firing area or the safety area. So things like power lines is the big one, but other cables that could be running across telephone lines, things like that. Trees as well. The trees overhang your firing area. It's not really an issue if trees overhang the spectator area, but if you've got big trees and branches that are overhanging where you're going to be firing fireworks, then that can be an issue. So again, how can you mitigate that? Well, making sure that your firing area isn't underneath any of those things. So it's quite an easy one to mitigate. Again, by just doing it somewhere else on the site. But again, if there's nowhere suitable on the site, if you've got power lines running right over your site and your site isn't wide enough to be able to move anywhere else, you have to find a different site. It really is as simple as that. So Bulletproof One was just being daft about the weather this week. Yeah, no, I realise that, but it is a valid point. You do need to modify your risk assessment based on the weather conditions, not only on the day, but in the weeks leading up to it as well. Because if you do have a drought, there hasn't been rain for weeks, then there is a greater risk, a higher risk of fire being an issue and things catching fire. So it's things to bear in mind. So, okay, let's look at another way. We're getting towards the end of these now. And then we'll throw it open to you guys if you've got any questions, or if there's anything that you don't think I've considered or we need to sort of talk about. I'm happy to do that. So safety area incursion. So you obviously have a spectator area, you have a firing area. You don't want spectators in your safety area, and you don't want spectators, of course, in your firing area. So again, if a spectator enters the safety area, what is the likelihood of a spectator entering the safety area? It's unlikely, I would say. Is it highly unlikely? No, not unless you've got a reinforced crowd barrier and crowd physically can't get past it. But if you've got just like the orange kind of netting, plastic netting kind of barrier, crowd barrier, it's possible that somebody could go into the safety area. So I would say on the risk matrix, I would say it's unlikely. What's the severity of harm if they were to go into the safety area? Well, I'd say it's moderate. I mean, they're not in the firing area, they're in the safety area. So I would probably score that as a moderate 4. So 2 under harmful and 2 under unlikely. So 2 times 2 is 4, and we get a moderate risk factor there before we've done any mitigations. Now, how could we mitigate that? Well, again, if we steward that crowd barrier, then that's the best way we can mitigate people going into the safety area. So that would then reduce the likelihood to highly unlikely. So that would then go from a harmful 2, unlikely 2 to a harmful 2, unlikely 1. So that would bring our risk factor down from moderate to tolerable. So similarly, let's talk about incursion into the firing area. If a member of the public got into the firing area, okay, what's the likelihood of that happening? That's highly unlikely because that's usually a lot further away from the spectators. So there's more chance of a spectator being in the safety area than there is a spectator getting all the way to the firing area. So I would say it's highly unlikely to happen. But if it did happen, that would be extremely harmful. So we could say that was a moderate risk, or potentially, like so 3 times 1, or we could say it's unlikely but extremely harmful. It could be substantial risk. Again, how do we mitigate that? How do we bring that risk factor down? Well, we could steward it. But again, we'd have to be careful where our stewards are in the firing area, because we don't want anybody in the firing area when you're firing. So the way you'd mitigate that actually would be to ensure that the position that you are firing your fireworks from, you have a clear view of the firing area. So you, as the person firing the display, have eyes on the firing area. You can see if there's anybody heading towards that firing area that shouldn't be. And obviously if there is, you just stop the show straight away. So you can mitigate those risks of somebody being in the firing area that way by having spotters, by having people who are keeping their eyes on the firing area. Obviously you don't want people in the firing area, even stewards, you don't want people stewarding at the firing area, but people further away with eyes on it to check that nobody is encroaching on there. Also, again, if we just go back to our fictitious site here, so people encroaching on the safety area and firing area on this particular site would actually be quite high, because as we mentioned before, people could just jump this wall. It's not very high there. It does go a little bit higher there. Let's see what it's like further around. Here it stays quite high all around. It does drop down a little bit here. So yeah, it is actually quite low there. So it would not be impossible, because our fireworks going to be kind of in this area here. It would not be impossible for somebody to jump over this wall and access the safety area or the firing area. So how would we mitigate that? We'd need to have enough stewarding along this pavement here to ensure that nobody's there. Again, this is not a spectator area. A spectator area would be on the field, but you would still need to steward along here at the back just to make sure that nobody gets in. So that's how we could mitigate that particular one. Another hazard, let's look at another few, and then we'll open it up to questions and things. So next one, firework malfunction. So it's a hazard. Fireworks do from time to time fail. Firework malfunction or misfires when a firework behaves in an unexpected way, possibly with dramatic consequences, like a firework explodes on the ground or at low level, sending debris in different directions, potentially to a crowd as well. Fortunately, such instances are rare but can happen for a number of reasons, including a manufacturing defect, poor or damaged packaging, inappropriate storage, i.e. at extreme temperatures or moisture or not being kept flat, incorrect handling and setup. Let's jump back to the chat. Luke says, typically during this live, the care home insurance provider for tomorrow's display has asked for people who are firing for me for a copy of my public liability insurance. Yeah, so let's just have a little bit of a segue and talk a little bit about insurance. Depending on the venue you're doing your display at, the venue itself may have insurance that covers firework displays. And for example, I do displays, the display I'm doing on Sunday is actually in the church grounds of Church of England churches, and all Church of England churches, their insurance actually covers them for firework displays. But not all venues do have firework insurance, in which case you are going to need firework insurance. How do you get firework insurance? So there are a couple, let me see if I can find you guys a couple of links. I do have them somewhere to hand. There are a couple of firms in the UK that will do specialist firework insurance for like one-off ad hoc events. Let me open these websites in my browser and I can show you them. So let's get this one as well. Okay, so let me show you. So one is this website. This is fireworksinsurance.co.uk. They do insurance for fireworks, as long as you're not doing category F4 stuff, for F3, F2 things. Let's see if it shows. They do annual insurance or one-off displays. Again, these are not my recommendations. I'm just showing you a couple of companies that I know of that do insurance. I don't know if actually, some of them give you a quote on the website, this one doesn't, but so that's fireworkinsurance.co.uk. The other one I'm aware of is events-insurance.co.uk. They do bespoke firework display insurance. One fireworks insurance, our fireworks insurance costs as little as £130. Get a quote. Let's see if we can kind of let's just get a quote for this fictitious field that we're doing, and let's see what it comes out at, shall we? So let's go through this. So, am I an insurance broker? No. Are you over the age of 16? Yes. What's my legal title? Well, let's just say I am private individual. Mr. We'll call myself the Great Marko. Let's see if he's going to give me a quote without actually kind of asking me for like email addresses and things like that. In fact, what I'll do, I will just switch back to my camera while I fill this in so you guys don't see my address. Let's just do the address of this site, which is, where was it? Infirmary Field. So Bradford, copy to clipboard. Let's find that address. Select. Country, England, mobile telephone number. Best contact number. All required fields. No, I don't think it's going to let me do this. Which required fields? That one. Surname. Okay, next step. It's going to let me do it now. Okay, so let's so date of my firework display. Let's say it's going to be on Sunday. I'll show you this browser window again. Will the firework display be carried out by a professional third-party fireworks company with their own insurance? And no, because we're going to do it ourselves. There we go. There's our premiums there. So yeah. So if you want £1 million worth of public liability insurance and you've got up to 100 people attending your display, the one-off cost would be £130. If you've got 5,000 people attending, it would be £1,432. So if that's £1 million liability, if you want to go up to 5 million, well, you can see the figures there. So that just gives you a rough indication of how much it is if you are taking out insurance for your own displays. So let's go back to my camera. So yeah, that was a little sort of segue on insurance there. We were also talking, weren't we, about firework malfunction, things that can go wrong. So how can you mitigate firework malfunction? Well, making sure that you source your fireworks from reputable suppliers. Make sure that they are all manufactured and complied with BSEN 15947. Ensuring that any fireworks that are damaged when you come to set them up are not fired. You take them out of your show. The expected behaviour or effects. Yeah, so make sure that you know what your fireworks are going to perform like. Use fireworks you've used before. Watch videos of fireworks if the fireworks you're firing, if you've not seen them before. Have a good idea of how they're meant to perform. Make sure you've got a minimum safety distance to the closest firework. Make sure that's enforced. Any firework that doesn't fully discharge during the display will be left until after the display is concluded, after which the firework will be drenched in water. Yeah, and I did another little video about how to safely dispose of fireworks that are misfired. Basically, if a firework doesn't go off, partly goes off or whatever, safest thing you can do, dunk it in a bucket of water, leave it there overnight, and then dispose of it normally. And also make sure that your safety area, we're going just back now to firework malfunction things, make sure your safety area is still enforced even after your fireworks are finished. There is a tendency, and I have seen this before, where as soon as the fireworks are finished, the public leave, or the public start to leave, and the stewards have kind of then switched off. No, you still need to enforce your safety area, your firing area, make sure that it's still secure until you've cleared that all away and made that safe. So there we go. So another hazard. We are coming to the end of these now because I know we've been going nearly 2 hours and I don't want this to be a 4-hour stream. I really don't. So let's look at this again. Accidental and cross ignition. not really a safety issue. I tend to include it on my risk assessment. So accidental ignition is when a firework ignites unexpectedly, i.e. from a stray spark, friction or excessive heat, things like that. If you set your fireworks up and they're very close to a big bonfire, and the heat from the bonfire could, in theory, ignite those fireworks, things like that. So it's quite a low risk. You can minimise cross ignition. You'll have seen that on my other live streams by foiling the top of your cakes and things like that. Make sure there's no smoking. And make sure the fireworks stay in their packaging until you're actually ready for them to be set out. So don't just get to the site, get all your fireworks out and then start setting them up. Set them up as you go. Keep them in the box until you actually set them up. Make sure you space the fireworks adequately so that cross ignition and crossfires and things like that are minimised. And this is on any superfluous fireworks that are not part of the display. So if you identify a firework as being damaged as you set it up and you take it out of your display, don't just leave it lying around on the firing site. Put it back in the van, put it somewhere safe out of the way. And make sure, once you've set up your fireworks, make sure that firing site is stewarded or manned until the time you fire your display. Never leave your firing site unattended once you've set up live pyro in that. One more, another one here. Low light. Low light is a risk, is a hazard. So low levels can increase the risk of trip hazards. So when is your event taking place? Is it taking when it's dark or when it's dusk? So I've said in this one, the event will take place approximately X number of minutes after sunset and will therefore be dark at time of firing. Venue grounds will not be illuminated. So again, this is another reason why it's good to do a visual inspection. Ideally a visual inspection at night as well as day if you can, but I know that's not always practical. Just to see how much illumination, natural illumination there is. So on our kind of test site here, I'm surrounded by roads on two sides. Let's see if we can work out if those roads are lit, see if there's street lights on those roads. Yeah, there we go, I can see street lights on there. So even though there's no floodlights or any illumination actually on this field, I can see that the roads around it are actually lit. So there will be a minimal residual amount of light on our firing site and our spectator area. But again, how do we mitigate that? How do we minimise the risks associated with low light? Well, we can ensure that during the setup, during the D-rig, there's adequate light in the firing site. We can ensure that when spectators are arriving and leaving, there's adequate lighting in the spectator area. Now that might get dimmed or switched off during the fireworks, and that's fine, but there still needs to be a degree of illumination on the spectator area, just in case if they need to exit for whatever reason. And that's another reason why your exit points should be well lit, well illuminated. So even if you dim the lights in the spectator area, make sure your exit points are clearly visible and illuminated so that if there is an emergency and people need to get out there quickly, they can see where the exits are, even if the lights go down in the spectator area. So those are a few of the things you can do to mitigate low levels of light. Again, in the firing area, ensuring that your firers or whoever's has got adequate head torches, spare batteries, all those kind of things. One thing I will mention in my risk assessment, because I think it's worth throwing in, stroboscopic effects. So if you've got lots of fireworks or strobe effects, they could potentially trigger somebody who's photosensitive to have a fit. So it is a small risk. Here's what I put in my risk assessment. Any strong light that flashes repeatedly and consistently into the eyes of a photosensitive individual can potentially cause a seizure. Some fireworks may produce light which could theoretically have this effect. However, there is little real-life evidence of fireworks triggering seizures in photosensitive individuals. So I'm not aware of instances when it's happened, but there's potential there. So I've kind of scored that as quite a low risk. But the mitigations for that, here's what I put. Individuals who are aware they have photosensitive will likely have knowledge of how to mitigate the associated risks themselves based on their own circumstances. This may include medication, increasing their distance from fireworks, i.e. moving further away, so the display occupies a small fraction of their field of vision rather than the whole field of vision, or covering one eye. Many individuals who are photosensitive may not be aware that they are photosensitive until their first seizure. In the extremely unlikely event such a an instance during a display, stewards should be aware of the symptoms and appropriate first aid cover be available. Now, okay, maybe I'm going a bit over the top there. As I say, I'm not aware of any instances where this has actually happened in the UK, but you know, again, you can't be too careful in your risk assessment. It's better to cover more stuff than you need in your risk assessment than not enough. So that's what I'll say on that. Noise. Okay, fireworks can be very loud. We all know that. And that can not only cause a nuisance to nearby residents, it can scare animals, and in extreme circumstances could lead to hearing damage. So how do we mitigate that? Well, again, we can look at where our firing site is. Have we got any houses nearby, or all these shops? Let's have a look. Let's have a look back on our road. So they look like shops kind of down on this side. That's all boarded up. Shops there. Shops. A pub. So actually, there we go. There's a. We've gone extreme close on that pub. It looks like a pub. Let's assume, for the sake of argument, that it is a pub. That does pose a bit of a risk to our display being so close. Let's see where that was kind of on. So this was on the corner here, I think, wasn't it? Yeah. So, okay, let's assume this pub is open on the night that we're going to be doing our firework display. What are the risks associated with that? Okay, so the risks are you've got people that come out of the pub, they're drunk, wandering around in the street. You don't want drunk people anywhere near your firing site, and potentially your firing site is just going to be the other side of this little low wall. So again, how do you mitigate that? Well, you need to make sure you've potentially got additional stewards in this area around here. So, but that's a good spot, that, when we look at buildings and things that are at risk in close proximity to our display. So there's no more residential buildings down this street as far as I can see. Are those flats? No, there's not. In fact, there's another pub. So we've got a few pubs down this road to be wary of, and that one is probably right opposite. Well, not quite, because I thought I was maybe opposite our entry point there, but it's close to it. So we do need to bear that in mind. So no houses there. There was this little kind of walkway, wasn't there, down there? Let's see, is this a residential area? Are these houses here? They may well be houses. Let's see if we can kind of quickly go around them. Well, there's a quick fit there. Is it a service centre? It is, okay. So, yeah, let's see where that was in relation to our site. So that was... So there's the quick fit garage there. We were going to do our fireworks here. I think that's far enough away that that's not a hazard. Let's just measure the distance. Measure distance to here. Not directions to here, distance to here. So that is 100 metres away. 200 metres away, in fact. 200 metres away. So that's not an issue. As I say, if you were closer, the issue would be potentially fumes. But again, at night time, assuming this garage closes at 5 and your display is at 8 or whatever, shouldn't really be an issue, but just something to be mindful of when you are risk assessing. So let's go a little bit longer. There's that chimney we saw earlier. It's far enough away for it not even to need mentioning in my risk assessment. But yes, these do look like, yep, there is a residential area here. So this is kind of at the back of where the spectators are going to be. So yeah. That's close to where we're doing it. So yeah, okay, let's come back there. So yeah, that was the residential area there. This is all like business, industrial. There's a car park there. So actually, well, we'll come on to that in a minute. So yeah, so is noise going to be an issue here? Well, we've got residents here. We're doing fireworks here. It would be polite to kind of let these residents here know that we were doing a firework display and let them know that the time and the date that we're doing it. You don't have to do that, but it'd be courteous to do that. Again, it is illegal to set off fireworks after 11 p.m. at night. Most days of the year, there's a few exceptions like bonfire night where you can do it up until midnight. New Year's Eve when you can do it up till 1 a.m. Chinese New Year and Diwali when you can do it up till midnight as well. But the rest of the time, if you're doing a public display, it's going to be earlier in the evening, isn't it? Let's be honest. So How can we mitigate the effects of noise? Well, we can be considerate. We can let the neighbours know that there's going to be a firework display. We can also make sure that spectators are close enough away that if we've got any loud maroons or anything like that, they are not right next up to them. They are, 50 plus metres away or whatever. We need to ensure that no single firework will exceed the legal maximum noise limit. Yes, there is a legal maximum noise limit that fireworks can be. And anybody know what that is? We'll ask that in the chat and see if anybody knows. Whilst we do that, let's catch up on chat. Rose and Crown based. Tasker says you in Epcot, I wish. 3D printer, what weather do you think is best mark in terms of accuracy? Looking at many different AccuWeather. Right, so I'm going to show you, we'll come back to noise in a minute. We're going to kind of segue off in talking about wind. So this is one of the things that I struggle with as well. I'm doing a display this Sunday. We are now on Tuesday. What is the weather going to be like on Tuesday, notably the wind? We are a few days away from that, so you can go on the BBC weather forecast, and that will give you one forecast. You can go on AccuWeather, that will give you another one. You can go on weather.com, that will give you another one. You'll get 3 or 4 different weather forecasts because we're that far away. It is really difficult. I found a really good website, and there is an app for it as well. It's called windy.com. I'm going to show it you. It's really, really detailed. It's really, really good. So this is windy.com. I say there's a companion app available for Android and iOS and all those kind of things, but you can also access this through your browser. So I've put in my location, so Bradford. And down here I can drag it across. So if I was doing a display on Sunday at 5, I could drag this across to 5. It will show me all the different forecasts. So let me zoom in a little bit on that if we can. Ooh, not that much. There we go. Ooh, it does zoom in quite quickly there. So all the different forecasts here are down here. So these are the ones that AccuWeather use and various different people. They'll all use one of these data sources, if you like. So this shows me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different. Let's just change this to miles per hour. This will show me all the different forecasts for Sunday at 5 p.m. So at the moment, one is indicating, well, this shows me the direction as well, the wind's coming from, and the strength. So at the moment, at this particular site in Bradford, on Sunday at 5 p.m, one saying 13 miles an hour, one says 13, one says 10, one says 10, one says 13, one says 7. Direction-wise, they're all kind of showing west to east. Some are saying southwest to east. But it gives you you can kind of see all the different forecasts overlaid on one. So it's really detailed. It shows me the gust speed as well as the wind speed. And I say these are all starting to look quite accurate. If you look a bit further on, let's see. Well, it's done this to let me look past Monday, but if I go up to Monday, yes, if I go as far as this will go, because this is further away at the moment, those forecasts are all quite different. But the closer we get to the actual time, if I go to like now, or this is kind of 6 o'clock this evening, a few hours ago, you can kind of see they're all kind of pretty much in agreement on the direction and the speed. The further into the future you go, the less accurate they are. But it's a really useful app because, say, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different forecasts for wind speed and gusts and wind direction. Really, really useful. Can't recommend it enough. I say I'm not affiliated with them. I just really like it. So there's an app, there's a website. This is the one I use. I will still use AccuWeather as well. I will still use the Met Office and BBC as well. Try and take a bit of an average. But when it comes to actual wind speeds and wind direction, I do find Windy is really useful. Bambography says, love Windy, detailed and pretty. Yes, it is. It is free. There is a premium thing you can subscribe to on it. I've not bothered doing that. I think that basically allows you to see more days in the future and a few other things like that. But really, the accuracy of forecasts isn't as accurate the further in the future you go. So, but now, if you're doing a display on Bonfire Night on Sunday, it's now Thursday. Kind of once we go into midnight on Friday, 2 days away, yeah, it should be fairly accurate then. You should have a rough idea of what the wind's going to do. So, hope that answers your question, 3D printer guy. I like this windy. Thank you. I've learned something new. Again, I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm glad you found it useful. Jack says, how far away from a petrol station? It's going to depend on the type of fireworks you're doing, whether you're doing category F2, F3, whether you're doing big shells. But if you're doing big shells, you'll be doing that as part of a professional display. The firework professional company will have risk assessments for that. Let's say you're doing some big F3 rockets, some big VSR4s or something like that. I would probably want to be a couple of 100 meters away from a petrol station at least, as a minimum, if I'm doing big rockets like that. Basically, you can't be too far away from a petrol station. Some petrol stations, again, are not open 24 hours. Does that make a difference? Not really, no, because you can still have vapour and fumes and stuff on the forecourt. You could still have all the petrol in the pumps. So as far away as possible. But for Cat 3 stuff, for big rockets, I would say 200 metres minimum. For smaller stuff, for F2 stuff, 100 metres maybe. Again, those are just what I would do personally. You guys might have different things, but the far enough, the further you are away, the better, essentially. So, 3D printing guy, I'm getting 2 to 3 millimeters of rain on Saturday afternoon. I'm glad I got the waterproofs out. Yeah, I say rain. It can dampen the atmosphere for the audience, but it doesn't really stop fireworks. It's the wind that's the key one, and that windy app is a really good, and the website really good thing to use. So back to noise. Yeah, did anybody know what the legal maximum noise limit is for fireworks in the UK? I shall tell you, it's 120 dBA, 120 decibels, A-weighted, because you can get A-weighted and C-weighted. I'm not going to bore you with the details with that, but 120 decibels at 15 metres. So for big rockets that fire in the sky, you know, big VSR4s or whatever, you're going to be more than 15 metres away. But basically, the decibel level mustn't exceed 120 decibels at 15 metres distance from the firework. So all CE marked fireworks, all legal fireworks in the UK, none of them exceed that. So you hear people saying, oh, fireworks get louder every year. They don't. There is a legal maximum limit that fireworks can be. It's 120 decibels at 15 metres. So how you can mitigate that? Well, by saying that all fireworks you're going to use are legal, they all conform to CE regs. They're not going to exceed 120 decibels at 15 metres. Other issues with noise to be aware of as well. Are there any farms? Are there any livestock nearby? Is there a cattery? Are there kennels? All those kind of things you just need to be aware of. So let's just go. Everybody, Jack says 400 metres is enough. Yeah, that should be fine from a petrol station. 3D printer guy, 120 decibels. Yeah. Jack Lee says 120 decibels is quite high. Yes, it's 120 decibels, like 15 metres as well. 15, that is. And Downscale says, as a very uneducated person in fireworks, is there a chance of having dangerously hot fallout that high? Yeah. Not so much the heat from things, it's more the debris from fireworks that tends to be more of a safety issue than the heat. Fireworks in the UK, again, to conform to CE regs, they have to have extinguished by the time they fall to the ground. So as long as a firework performs normally, so if you've got a big rocket or something like that with a big hang time, then legally it has to basically have finished its effect before it reaches the ground. Occasionally, you know, wind could affect that, or if you've got a faulty product, that could affect that. But normal firing fireworks should fully extinguish before they reach the ground in terms of aerial effects. So you've more of an issue of things actually, debris falling on a person. Cardboard mainly. Some fireworks do have plastic in plastic tubes. Rocket sticks as well. Big rocket sticks, they could do quite a lot of damage to people. So there is a risk. You can mitigate all these risks though by ensuring that fireworks are angled away from the audience. You take into account the wind, make sure there's enough separation between your fireworks and the spectators. There's lots of things you can do to mitigate that. But yes, it's a risk. You can't do fireworks without any risk. You can't do fireworks with zero risk. There is always going to be risk. The idea of risk assessment is to show that you've thought about those risks, you've identified those risks, you've taken reasonably practical steps to mitigate those and reduce those risks. It's not always going to be possible to reduce risks. Some risks are always going to be present, but you need to show an understanding that you've thought about them, you've considered them, you've done whatever you can that's reasonably practical to reduce those risks. So there we go. So yeah, 120 decibels. We were talking about farms, fields, catteries, kennels, or other houses with lots of animals in within the immediate vicinity. So again, let's go back to our Google Maps. I can't see any fields in this area, you know, with potentially livestock. What's over here? That looks like potentially a school over there, or a sports centre. There's a field, a playing field there. It's not a livestock field. What's over here? Just some manicured gardens. So I can't see any farms, fields in the close proximity. So not an issue here. If there were livestock very close, you might need to have a word with the farmer. Some farmers are okay. Some farmers will be like, yep, that's fine. Others might insist no fireworks, or you might be able to compromise on low noise fireworks. So, you know, you just got to kind of bear that in mind. Catteries, kennels, again, as long as you give them notice, they can't prevent you from doing fireworks. In fact, a farmer couldn't prevent you from doing fireworks. But again, it's polite. If you can get these people on board, it's always good to do. I say you can compromise by taking some louder products out of your show, using some low noise products instead. Even invite the farmer along, invite the owner of the cattery along, give them some free tickets, and sweeten them up like that. So there's things you can do there. Other things to be aware of, again, hospitals. Are there any hospitals with sick or elderly? Care homes? Are there any care homes in the area? Just things to be, you know, aware of and sensitive about and conscious of. Jack says, my venue has the wind going towards the audience. Yeah, at the moment, my venue for Sunday does as well. We shall see. It might change on the day. It might reduce on the day. Even if it's going towards the audience, you've got to take into account the wind speed and the wind direction. You can't take into account one without the other. You've got to think about both. Even if your wind is towards the audience, if it's very, very slight and you've got a big enough distance, if you've got 100, 200 metres between your fireworks and your audience, it might still be okay to fire. If you've only got a very small space and it's quite breezy, it might not be safe. So, yeah, but I hope that doesn't hamper your display, Jack, for your display. Danscale says, your tip on stream to angle slightly cakes away makes, yeah, from the crowd's a great deal, but I could see having to consider the distance behind your launch area being considered. Yes, that's absolutely right. So yes, you can angle cake slightly away. So if you've got wind blowing towards your audience, rather than having your fireworks go straight up, angle them slightly back away from the audience. The audience won't notice any difference, but the bursts will be higher in the sky. Well, they won't be higher in the sky. They'll be further back from the spectators in the sky. But yes, you do then need to adjust your fallout area, make sure you've got enough space behind your site for that. That said, if your wind is blowing across towards the audience, you angle them back, your debris are not necessarily going to fall any further back, they're just not going to fall in the audience. So there's lots of factors you've got to take into account with that. Danscale says, wow, I really hope everyone is responsible and considerate about professionals as you are. Clearly a professional. Sadly, they're not. I don't think you were here at the start of the stream. This field that we keep looking at is a public field. It is actually illegal to do fireworks in this field without proper permits from the council. That, however, doesn't stop one firework retailer, who I'm not going to name, regularly letting off fireworks in this particular field, filming it and putting it on YouTube. So that's dangerous and it's illegal. So yeah, not everybody is as considerate and professional and as knowledgeable of the law, or respectful of the law, should we say, as I am. Jack Lee saying, I was thinking 80 to 100 metres. Yeah, if you've got that kind of distance, if it's just a slight wind towards the audience, you'll probably be okay. You might need to cut out some of your... If you've got some really high level effects with a big hang time, I'm going to talk about VSL4s again. If you've got VSL4s and got a big hang time, you might just need to cut those out of your display. But if it's just, you know, lower level stuff that's only going up to a height of 15, 20 metres or so, with a not particularly big hang time, they may still be okay. But, you know, you'll have to assess that yourself on the day. Might change, conditions may change during the day, may change for the better, may change for the worse. Danscale says, what's the size of this field? It seems rather tight to consider all the... Yeah, absolutely, it is. This field is not suitable for doing fireworks. So not only is it illegal to do fireworks there. It's not suitable. We've looked at the reasons why. Some of the reasons is why it's not suitable earlier on. One of them being is there's not enough entrance and exit points to safely accommodate people on this site. But in terms of the actual site, and again, if you just tune in, I'll show you this really cool feature. You might not be aware of this. If you are, I apologise. But on Google Maps, you can right click on a point and say measure distance. You can right click on another point and click distance to here. Where is it there? It will then show you the distance. So the distance from there to there is 148.83 meters. So this is a really useful tool to check that you've got enough distance between your firing site and your audience. Again, always doing a visual site inspection. I always recommend doing that. If you're able to do 2 site inspections, one in the daytime, because obviously you'll see a lot more, that's useful to do. If you can do one at night time as well, see what the conditions are like in the dark on your firing site, that's really useful as well. But once you've done that and thought, okay, well, that looks a suitable place to do fireworks, and I think I'm going to have the crowd, the barrier here and things like that, jump on Google Maps, measure the distance, check what it is. Then when you come to put it in your risk assessment, don't use an exact number. Don't say, the crowd barrier is going to be 36.7 meters away from the fireworks. Just say if crowd barrier is going to be a minimum of, or at least 36 centimeters, just so you've got a bit more of that wiggle room. If you put an exact figure in then and you set your barrier up either side of that and something goes wrong, then you could actually be liable because you said your barrier was going to be at 36.7 and it was 36.5, so little things like that, could be picked up on. So just things to be mindful of as well. No problem, downscale if you missed it, that's fine. I don't mind covering these things again. Yeah, there we go. Downscale is just converting meters to feet. I'm pretty sure that Google, in fact, it does actually on the bottom of the screen, just down here, down here, click on it here. It does actually give the distance in meters and also in feet. So you can convert it. I tend to work in meters, but how do we clear all those measurements? There we go. Yeah, I appreciate that some of you guys work in feet as well. Okay, so we've covered noise. Adverse weather we've just talked about as well. So the main one is wind. Heavy rain we mentioned earlier as well. That could cause the ground conditions to be unsuitable. So that's something to bear in mind. The other type of weather to be mindful of is thunderstorms. Obviously, thunderstorms, there's a risk lightning could, you set up all your fireworks, there's a lightning strike, your fireworks exploding and go everywhere. So always check your forecast as well for the probability of thunderstorms. How do you mitigate against that? Well, if there's thunderstorms in the vicinity, you might have to cancel your show. You might have to set up your fireworks at a different time. So if you're in the middle of setting up the fireworks and there's a thunderstorm, you might have to stop, move everybody off the firing site until that storm has passed, and then carry on. That in turn might have a knock-on effect to the firing time. You might have to push your firing time back. So basically you have to work around thunderstorms. Don't be rigging fireworks if there's a thunderstorm close by. If there's a thunderstorm in the distance, that's okay. If it's approaching now and it's getting close, stop all the activity, leave everything where it is, vacate the firing site, and don't let anybody in the firing site until that thunderstorm has passed. So something that's often overlooked and not thought about, but do check the probability of thunderstorms on your firing day as well. So other things this time of year, we're talking about adverse weather and ground conditions. This time of year in the UK, it's autumn, the fall. Leaves fall off the trees. If it's been raining, leaves can be wet. That can cause a slip hazard, a trip hazard. So, check the number of trees in the area. If you're doing this right next to a forest or lots of trees, are there going to be leaves on the ground? Is that an issue? Is that going to hide potential trip hazards? What can you do to mitigate that? Could you rake up the leaves? Are the leaves going to be okay? Are the leaves going to be dry enough that they'll blow away? Not going to be an issue. So things like that to take into account. Downscale says that'd be pretty awesome if someone set up a lightning rod to ignite the show, though. Yeah, but of course you never know when lightning is going to strike, do you? Unless you watch Back to the Future, yeah. So there we go. Instead of charging the DeLorean with the lightning, they should have set up a firework display, shouldn't they? And set that off. That would have been quite impressive. Anyway, I digress. And whilst we're still on the subject of weather, the other one is extremely cold temperatures. Not really an issue so much around bonfire night. If you're doing something around New Year in the UK, you could have frozen ground. If you're setting your fireworks up earlier on in the day, the ground is frozen, there's snow on the ground, ice, whatever. By the time you come to light your fireworks, they might have actually frozen. What impact will that have? It could mean that they don't go up as high in the sky. They could burst a lot lower, which is obviously a safety issue. So what can you do to mitigate that? Well, if it's icy on the ground, try not to set your fireworks up too far in advance. Try to insulate them so they're not right against the ice or the snow or whatever. In fact, doing fireworks nice is probably not a good idea because they're going to slide around anyway. But snow, frozen ground, try and insulate them a bit underneath. Lots of things you could do. You could just put a board underneath that raises it up. You could put a bit of carpet underneath. I know that sounds strange, but put some carpet underneath. That will just help insulate it. Just raise it off that frozen ground. So lots of things you can do to mitigate. In terms of that, Downscale says that's just another reason we need time machines. Yeah, absolutely. So one more hazard that we're going to look at is other events. So we've basically focused on our firework event that's going to be in this field. What we've not risk assessed or taken into account is, are there any other events, public events, that are going to be happening in this close vicinity at the same time as our display? So what are the risks with that? Well, it could mean there's more traffic on the roads, more people could be around. So things to look for. So we're just going to look at my map here. So I can see there's a mosque here, Bradford Central Mosque. It looks a big mosque, judging from the size of its car park. So if I was doing a firework display in this field, which I'm not, this is hypothetical, I would be checking with the mosque, see if they've got any events on at the same time as my fireworks. Because again, if there were several hundred people in this mosque all coming out of this mosque at the same time my firework display is going on, there could be 200 extra cars on this road, lots of footfall. So things to bear in mind with then. Let's see if there's anything else nearby that could have something on at the same time as this display. Zooming out a little bit, don't think there's anything. Oh, I think there was something. Was there? There is actually here. There is a stadium, Bradford City Football Club stadium there. Is that far enough away from my field to not be an issue? The answer is I don't know. I don't know. I can't see a car park for this stadium. It just seems to be sort of surrounded by housing. Oh, there is a car park. There's some sort of car park the other side of the... no, that looks like it might be for those. So it doesn't look like there's a car park for this stadium. So what does that mean? Well, that means that people are going to be parking on the side roads. They'll probably park in the residential streets around here. But there is a potential that they could be parking on roads around here. So again, that's just something to be mindful of and factor into your risk assessment. So find out if there is a match on at this stadium on the evening that you're going to be doing your display here. Just factor in the fact that there might be increased traffic on these roads, increased parking, increased footfall, things like that. So Downscale says, does the temperature affect the vertical thrust of fireworks like colder words? Yeah, so if you freeze a firework, put it in your freezer, and then, not that I'm suggesting you do this, but if you put a firework in your freezer, if you've got two fireworks identical, put one in your freezer and one at room temperature, and you put them next to each other and fire them, they will likely perform differently. So the one at room temperature will probably go higher in the sky. The one that's been frozen probably won't get as high. Even worse if your fireworks get damp, condensation, things like that. So one of the things as well, we talked earlier about firework malfunctions and how you can kind of minimise that. And one of the things you can do before that is how you store your fireworks. Are you storing your fireworks in an outhouse building or a garage or a shed that might be damp with big temperature changes and condensation could form and the fireworks could get damp? If fireworks get damp, they're not going to go high in the sky. They're going to break really low. They're going to be dangerous. So all those kind of things to consider. So we've been streaming now nearly 2.5 hours. I didn't want this to be a long stream. So I hope that's given you guys a bit of a flavour of kind of the methodology, the mindset that I use on my risk assessment. I'll show the risk matrix again. This is the one I tend to work with because it's fairly straightforward and simple. You can go more complex with this to say I've got like 3 levels of severity and 3 levels of likelihood. I've seen ones that go 10 levels of severity, 10 levels of likelihood, and it can get quite complex. This is quite a simple way. If you want to screenshot this, and use this yourself, then by all means do. But I hope that's given you some kind of tips, tricks, useful insight, things to be mindful of when you're thinking about your firework displays. when you come to doing your risk assessment. I say don't see risk assessment as being like a dull, boring thing that, oh, I've got to do it. It's a box ticking exercise. It's a tool to allow you to do your firework display. Okay, it's necessary, it's needed, you need it. If things go wrong with your display and there's an incident, you need to demonstrate that you've considered the risks and that you took action to minimize those risks. Even if you can't completely eliminate them, you've got to show that you've thought about them and you've reduced them down to an acceptable level. So that's what your risk assessment is a tool. It will provide you with reassurance, with backup if things go wrong, that actually you have thought about these things, you have risk assessed them. Again, that's not sort of covering everything. There might be other risks unique to your site where you're doing fireworks. That's just a general thing of some of the things that I look at when I'm doing my risk assessments. But I do hope that's been useful. 3D Printing Guy says, is this your last live stream before your display? So what day is it today? It's Thursday, isn't it? So I probably won't live stream tomorrow. I will be live streaming on Saturday. Fireworks from my back garden, my big bonfire fireworks that I do every year. Yes, I know it's not on bonfire night this year, it's the day before. Because on bonfire night itself, I'm going to be doing a public display in Liverpool, which I'll be filming and putting on my channel a week later. But Saturday I'll be live streaming again, probably around about 5 p.m. UK time, 5:30ish. I'll put a little promo video out probably tomorrow about that. And schedule a stream and all that good things. But yeah, next live stream is going to be this Saturday evening around about 5 p.m. UK time, which is midday kind of Eastern time. We're going to do some fireworks from my back garden, which we do every year, and I'll eat a jacket potato on stream and all those good things and chat to you guys, and be a lot of fun. And then yes, I'm in Liverpool on Sunday doing a community display, and that's what all my other live streams have been about this last couple of weeks, setting up for all that. Loads of prep has gone into that. I'm hoping the weather conditions are going to be favourable and they're going to work out. So the forecast at the moment, the wind direction doesn't look that favourable, but we shall see. There's still a few days to go. So, yeah. So no, it's not my last live stream before my display in Liverpool. It's my last live stream before my display in my back garden, but you've only got like 2 days to wait for that. So not long to go on that. And Bambography says, thank you. While I'm quite happy with my RA, I'll run through the... Yeah, and this is the thing. I'm not saying this is the way to do risk assessments and no other way is acceptable. Everybody does risk assessments differently. There isn't one standard risk assessment template that, hey, everybody that does fireworks, everybody uses this same risk assessment. Everybody does it differently. And I'm not saying, hey, do it my way is the best. All I want to do is just give you guys some pointers, some things to think about that you might not have considered when you're thinking about the safety of your display and your display site and how to do a firework display safely. So I'm not saying go away and throw your risk assessment in the bin and redo it my way. I'm not saying that at all. But hopefully there's been a few little nuggets of information in this stream that might be useful. Jack says, how is that shop still allowed to be open in Bradford? Good question. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. For those of you who don't know what we're talking about, there is a retailer, firework retailer in Bradford that uses this field. That's why I've used it. This field is a public field. It is illegal to do fireworks on this field. It's illegal to set off fireworks in a public place full stop without licenses from the council and things like that and permits. This guy sets off fireworks in this particular field and then films them and puts them on his YouTube channel, and he's a retailer in Bradford. That's all I'm going to say on that. So Shimmer and Shine says bye. Adam says thank you for this information tonight. Yeah, I know it's been a bit longer than I was hoping to go. We've been going 2.5 hours. At least it's not 4 hours. But hopefully there's some useful information in there. Shimmer and Shine, hashtag Team Replay. Downscale says to Adam, right, despite where you live, these are wonderful tips. Yeah, again, of course, I'm talking, my live stream has been specifically about UK regulations, like doing it 15 metres from a road and things like that. Regulations are different for fireworks all around the world. I appreciate that. So you do need to check the laws where you are if you're watching outside of the UK. But I hope that's given you some generic tips of things to look for, things to think about, even if, distances are slightly different in America or whatever like that. It's that mindset. It's getting you into that mindset of thinking about things that you perhaps weren't thinking about before when it comes to thinking about how to do your firework display for safe, basically making it safe for all your spectators, everybody involved. So Jack says just seeing the video on, yes, that's right, there is a video on that on the forums. Adam is in Cumbria. Well, thank you for joining us from Cumbria, Adam. Really appreciate your company. tonight. So yeah, if anybody's new, I say my name's Mark. I do fireworks professionally and also as a bit of a hobby. My channel is all about fireworks. If you like fireworks, if you enjoy fireworks, if you kind of want to know more about fireworks, then why not consider subscribing to my channel? My channel is family friendly. All my content, all my live streams, suitable for all ages. There's no bad language. There's nothing inappropriate in my stream. So it's suitable for everyone. So please consider subscribing. If you want to help my channel out, support my channel, there is a link in the description, a PayPal link if you want to. You can also super chat and all those things. Don't really talk about it much because all my stuff is free. I don't ask for any money for it, but I know some people find my content useful and enjoyable and entertaining and informative and want to sort of show their appreciation. So there's links to that in the description if you want to do that. But I say I will be back live in 2 days' time. I will be scheduling a stream for that probably tomorrow, and we're going to be doing some live fireworks on my channel from my back garden, which I'm really excited about. So let's have a look. Downscale says regulations or not, just being aware of such things you brought attention. Yeah, and that's the thing. It's just your venue will be different, even if you're not in the UK. I say we've just looked at this one random field just as an example. It's not suitable for fireworks. We've established that. Your sites hopefully are, but these are things I've given you that hopefully you can kind of think about when you do them. And the 3D printer car says, also the anti-petition got a response from the government today, nothing is changing. Yeah, this time of year there's always petitions saying let's ban fireworks, and yeah, it never gets anywhere. So Downscale says, I can't remember how long ago I subscribed to the Great Marko. Well, I appreciate, Downscale, you have been a subscriber to my channel for a long period of time, and I appreciate your company on this live stream. I think you were in my live stream as well the other day, so thank you for that. 3D Printer Guy says, take care, Mark. Thanks for all the tips and advice. There we go. So we've been going just under 2.5 hours. So I think that's enough risk assessing for today. I hope that's been useful. If you're watching this on the replay and you've got questions, or if you're watching this again, whatever, ask away in the comments. I will read them. I will respond to them. And I hope you guys, if you're doing a bonfire night display this year or doing a firework display anytime in the coming weeks and months, I hope this has helped make that go just that little bit more smoothly and safely for you. So thanks, everybody. I'm going to sign off now and say goodnight, but hopefully I will see you guys all back here on